Great show. Sorry, freaks. We just recorded a 2-hour podcast and you missed it. And we actually all have to go now. So the podcast that wasn't. Just kidding. We party ripped today. And I must say, Matt, this might be the most eclectic mix of accents we've ever had on One Rabbit Hole recap.
There you go. Yeah, we had a big week at Bitcoin Park this week. I told Marty that just Craig Raw was joining us. And then when the camera went live, he saw that we have Murch, Wiz, and Orange Surf here as well.
Yeah, a bombardment of great minds meeting in Nashville. I'm here alone in Austin. We've got a lot to talk about, gentlemen. Mempools. Is there one? Are there many? Let's start with that question.
Well,
Murch, I'm throwing that to you.
Well, every node has its own mempool, but abstractly they overlap so much that we talk about the mempool. And sometimes Wiz also likes to claim that his mempool is the most popular, that most people look at. So the mempool obviously refers to the mempool of mempool.space.
thanks for that excellent recommendation.
You're so quiet, Wiz. Speak up. You have strong opinions.
I don't even know what a mempool is, actually. I just
There are many mempools. Every node has their own mempool.
Are we live or we're still?
We're live.
Oh,
We are
okay.
we are very live.
We're
I
live.
thought we were testing the mics.
So Murch was kind enough to join us. He's going to actually be running to his flight in like 15 minutes, I think, right? 5 minutes. But before he goes, we had Craig came in from South Africa, and Craig ran a Sparrow workshop for all of us. He flew in from South Africa just to show us how to use the best software wallet in Bitcoin. And Murch, this is your first time using Sparrow, right?
Yeah, I hadn't actually looked at it before, but I was blown away.
And how so?
It looks like a tool for power users that has a polished UX and all the functionality right there, and it surfaces the complexity in a way that you can choose what to interact with. So it looks like something that, I don't know, someone that knows what's going on under the hood really would want to use.
Cool. Thanks much. That's a great recommendation from you of all people. So yeah, it's good to hear. I look forward to chatting to you more about it.
Well, I
The
think
freaks know that I'm obsessed with Sparrow, so we were just. I will just echo Craig's sentiment that we were very excited.
You know what I
about your
really like
reaction
is
to it.
the hat, the Sparrow hat with the sparrow on the front. I'll trade you a mempool hat for a Sparrow hat.
Oh, those Sparrow hats, they're very, very pricey. They really are premium grade hats.
I think we have the same hat guy, actually.
The first time I ever met Craig, we were at BitDevs in Miami last year before Bitcoin 2022, and I was ripping a piss in the bathroom, and Craig walks in. I didn't know what Craig looked like yet at that point because he was using the fake picture on the announcement for the conference, and Craig was wearing that hat, and I was wearing my dispatch hat. And I was at the urinal, and he was like walking up to the urinal. And I was like, "Great hat, dude." And he was like, "Likewise, great hat." And then we both finished peeing, and he was like, "You're Matt, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "I'm Craig." And then we had a hug in the bathroom, and that's how the first time we ever met.
was this before or after
Amazing
you guys?
story.
Was this before or after you guys zipped up?
We were zipped, but we hadn't washed our hands yet. We washed together afterwards. We were too excited.
That was the level of trust.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of trust involved.
But I think before Murch has to bounce to his flight, we should definitely, I mean, obviously we titled this episode, Mempools are running hot. Obviously, the big story of the last week is the fee pressure at the Bitcoin network. Fee pressure, transaction pressure, stress test, whatever you want to call it. There's been a lot of transactions made. Fees have gone up. We had the first block that had a fee reward that was equal to or greater than the block subsidy. It was the first one since 2017, I believe, back when there was fee congestion back then. What do you guys take? What are you guys taking away from the last week in Bitcoin with all this transaction, quote unquote, congestion? Is Bitcoin not working? Is it working as designed? What's going on with ordinals, inscriptions, BRC20? What's the take?
I would say it was an interesting stress test, and I would say we've passed with flying colors for the most part, compared to 2017 when the Lightning Network was nascent with just a few people that were running it against the recommendation of the developers. Lots of wallets not having CPFP and RBF functionality, and just generally the infrastructure not being ready for what came around on Christmas 2017. This time around, it felt like a lot. People could deal better with it. I didn't see that much screaming and moaning that everything was broken. People just outpaid it if they needed to. And yeah, so in a way, I think for a long time, we've been thinking that when Bitcoin becomes more successful and more broadly adopted, there will be more contention for being in blocks. And this is sort of what we've seen in the last week. So for everybody that's building a Bitcoin company out there, it was a way of testing whether their product will be working when Bitcoin becomes more broadly adopted. So I don't know. I don't collect no digital artifacts, but it seems like not that bad right now for the outcome. I hope it doesn't stay like that for months. That would suck, but yeah.
Yeah, I think we all, before we hit record, freaks, I think we all agree, like, we're pretty much ordinal inscription agnostic. It is what it is.
Well, they're shitcoins.
Yes.
But they're also fee-paying Bitcoin transactions.
Yes.
Like what Murch was bragging about the percentage of Taproot transactions.
Well, 42% of all outputs are Taproot, but
Murch,
there is script path. That's wrong. They should be key path spans, man.
There you go.
Well, Murch, you brought up a good point. I don't know where we would even find this stat, but since RBF has been enabled by default, or it's not even by default, you can turn it on default, whatever. We made some RBF changes earlier this year, late last year. Like, would we be able to see the amount of transactions over the last week that were broadcast initially with RBF and then actually used RBF to move it up? Is that on Mempool?
So
yes, we have it's under a secret URL. If you go to mempool.space/RBF, you can actually see
so hidden
secret RBF dashboard.
Really secret.
Yeah, not secret anymore.
Now this is a exclusive RHR announcement. So,
well, isn't the whole point that you don't have to signal for RBF anymore because the relay policy was changed?
Well, it's default off. So we're talking about the new Mempool full RBF startup option for Bitcoin Core that was released in 24, and by default it's off. Some people were really unhappy about it, and I think they actually promoted it a lot that way. So I don't know how many nodes are.
But the important thing is what Wiz chose. Wiz, did you turn it on, or is it still off on your node?
This is two different things, right? So Mempool full RBF means that replacements would be accepted by your mempool when you turn it on, even though the original transaction has not signaled replaceability.
Right.
But so RBF, the new feature that mempool.space has rolled out, is it graphs for you which transactions got replaced and the whole replacement tree. And so this is pretty neat, especially if, for example, multiple transactions get replaced by one new version. So you have a place to see that right on the transaction page now.
Yeah, but that wasn't my point. I mean, so it's a relay. It's a change to how nodes relay these transactions. And ultimately, even though it's opt-in, all that you really need is you need a certain number of nodes, and it's hard to quantify exactly what that is, to have it enabled so your new transaction gets to a miner. And yes, the miner has it enabled, right? And miners are naturally going to enable it quickly because they want higher fees.
I think we've seen a slower uptake than some predicted. I think I know of one mining pool that runs it. Luxor, I think, and I don't know if other mining pools do it. But yes, a small fraction of all nodes enabling mempool full RBF would be enough to get transactions to mining pools that do use full replacement.
But I think if you just step back for a minute and you consider the full mempool environment that we've had the past couple of weeks, I mean, is the full RBF debate really relevant even if the Mempools full all the time?
I think it bolsters the argument for it. I think that basically the biggest pushback came from businesses that are trying to do zero conf, and in a fiat environment like we saw last week, zero conf is basically too risky. Or well,
It's
maybe they
trivially
still
easy
figure it
to
out, but
double spend or just whatever shenanigans.
right. So I would expect that in this environment, a lot of the pushback would dissipate because the zero conf policy just doesn't make sense anymore.
Well, the other thing I saw BitMEX research published that there was a lot more stale blocks that we had this week.
Yeah.
Because the blocks were so full, because latency was high, and also maybe because they were also competing on such large fees that they might have been some block withholding strategies that were happening.
No, I think it's much simpler than that. It's just that there are so many transactions, like over 500,000 transactions in the mempool, that Bitcoin Gore's get block template was taking like 30 or 60 seconds to run. So what the mining pools were sending to the miners to mine on was already like a minute or two old. And so that's, I think, why you had so many stale blocks. I mean, even yesterday there was like 3 or 4 stale blocks, right?
So would you argue in that environment, maybe one conf isn't even enough?
One conf is never really enough. I think maybe 6 is like the recommended. Depends on your
but
threat
6
model.
is probably overkite for most.
Pull that.
Depends on your
for
threat
small
model.
amounts, you probably.
Yeah, so this was an interesting tweet from Guyervik, quote tweeting BitMEX research. So the number of stale blocks over the last 10,000 blocks was 17 when BitMEX posted this yesterday. Vic here is Guyervik's making the argument that these orphan blocks are because of the ordinals disrespecters nodes that are pruning these particular transactions. Do you guys think there's validity to that claim?
No.
No.
It's about
not at all.
It's about the time to generate the new block template. I mean, even on Mempool space, we constantly run the block template, which is what we visualize as the Mempool blocks, and we were struggling to keep the site online.
I mean, you saw Ampool, wasn't it, that opened a pull request or an issue on Bitcoin Core today to that effect?
We're not supposed to.
Well, Logan, actually go back to the original BitMEX research tweet and then go to the quote tweets. Eric Voskuil had an interesting point too, which was that the orphan blocks may be a sign of more decentralization throughout the mining layer, which I'm not sure I agree with, because there would have to have been pools that popped up that are broadcasting these transactions.
No, I mean, I know for a fact from many mining pools that I have relationships with, that was the exact problem, is that the get block template algorithm just took over a minute to run. And so if you have 2 blocks in less than a minute, you're going to have 2 block reorgs like we saw.
Yeah.
It's really that simple. They need more powerful servers. The algorithms need to be optimized. I know Murch and his shadowy supercoder friends have a lot of really smart ideas to optimize the get block template algorithm inside Bitcoin Core, right?
Yeah, there's some work in the works.
Yeah, it's just things we need to fix and improve.
Yeah, well, that's one of the. You go.
Sorry, I think Murch needs to leave. But Murch, before you leave, you want to just shill Bitcoin Optech in your podcast?
Guys, if you're interested in learning about the technical developments in Bitcoin, we put out a newsletter every Wednesday where we cover recent work. You should check it out. We also do a recap in audio on Thursdays, if that's more your jam. So please,
yeah, I mean,
give us a listen.
They're literally listening on podcasts right now. So they just search Bitcoin Optech in your favorite podcast app, right?
There's a link
Click
on
subscribe.
bitcoinops.org where we say podcast, and you'll find some there. All right.
Thanks, Murch. Appreciate you. Safe
Thanks
travels.
for joining us, Murch.
By the way, if you come to Bitcoin Park, you get picked up at the airport and you get driven to the airport. My co-founder here, Rod, is about to drive Murch to the airport.
We do that too here at the Commons.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
But staying on that, I mean, Wiz, you brought up a good point. Weeks like this where something happened, because this somewhat came out of the blue, and this was driven mainly, I believe, it's Ordinal's derivative, the BRC20 token. Maybe we can talk about what the hell that is, and why the network reacted the way it did. But regardless of what it was or what caused it, there was a stress test. Some people are calling it an attack. I would not call that. I would call it a stress test. And this is one of the interesting things we found with like the block template time. Like that's one of the pain points, one of the areas that we need to improve.
For over 6 months in the first half of 2021, the mempool was full. But the difference at that time was
Mempools.
Right. All mempools were full. The default 300 megabyte size mempool was full. And for 6 months, it didn't clear. But the difference between the past couple of weeks and that first half of 2021 is that at that time, they were more typical Bitcoin transactions. And so you didn't have 500,000 transactions in the mempool. You only had maybe 200,000 or so. And just because of the sheer number of transactions, that's what makes this get block template algorithm so slow. I mean, it doesn't really scale linearly. There's a lot of relationships between the transactions. And so it was just it. You know, the Bitcoin core developers have a lot of smart ideas how to improve this algorithm, and they will over time. And CPUs are getting faster, so that'll improve over time. It's just, if you have 1 million transactions in your mempool, it's going to take minutes to generate the block template, and that's why we have a 10-minute block time target time, right? Is to avoid this block propagation and stale block.
Yeah, and preserve decentralization and not create a situation like people. First of all, sending Bitcoin transactions is not an attack on the network. That is fucking ridiculous. Bitcoin is working as designed. We already see mempools starting to clear out to a degree. Fees are down significantly because if you send Bitcoin transactions, it comes with a cost. There's a dynamic free market on this scarce block space. Now, why is the block space scarce? The block space is scarce for two main reasons. The first, and they're very related. The first is concerns over node centralization. Those blocks need to be propagated. That requires bandwidth. It also requires processing power in terms of verifying the blocks. So if block space is unbounded, if the amount of data transferred through the Bitcoin network is unbounded, accessibility for using and running your own node becomes much worse, and less people are able to do it. And we have node centralization, right? To interact with the Bitcoin network, you need to use a Bitcoin node. If you're not using your own Bitcoin node, you're using someone else's Bitcoin node. You're trusting them with validating the rules of the network, and you're trusting them with your privacy. This is something we see in shitcoin land all the time. Chains like Ethereum, most people don't run their nodes. And then even bigger shitcoins like Nano that have no fees, even less people run their nodes, right? Because that data limit is not enforced. It's unbounded. Now, you also see the same situation on the mining side, because the more data that is transferred, the higher latency you start to see. And if we don't have that bounded and we don't have that limited and it's not scarce, then it favors larger miners that might not even be doing block withholding strategies where they're not sharing it with the rest of the network, but it'll naturally centralize mining. And the 10-minute block time target also falls into that category. When you start to see shitcoins that speed up their block target amounts because they want to say we're faster and we're better than Bitcoin or whatever, that will naturally lead to more mining centralization.
Yeah. And sticking on this get block template problem that arose and drove all these orphan blocks, is that a limitation that was well understood before this stress test, or did it sort of come to the surface as the stress test was going on?
I guess it depends who you ask, right? Maybe some mining pools are more aware of this scaling issue than others. Obviously, with mempool space, we're very, very focused on the mempools, so we optimized our get block template algorithm many, many times. I know Mononaut had many sleepless nights just rewriting all these algorithms and optimizing it, but we kept the site online and we worked around the issue, and we're going to upgrade the hardware and make many other changes to improve this. But at the end of the day, if you're running a default 300 megabyte sized mempool, then your Bitcoin core node would just simply purge these low fee transactions, and it wouldn't really become a huge issue. Because
how big was your mempool at peak?
I think I saw like 560,000, something like that.
Transactions.
Yeah.
But like in gigs.
Maybe 1.1 gig.
That's pretty big, right?
Yeah, I mean, we saw around there in 2021. So I mean, you could probably pull up the graph on Mempool space if you look at the 3-year, 4-year chart. But it was around that same level. Yeah, it was just, like I said, twice as many transactions. That was the main difference.
And I think that's the real issue, right? The fact that there's so many transactions is actually what makes the get block template method slow, right? Because you have to run through it, and every time you change a transaction or you say that this one's going to be included in the block, you have to go to all the others and say, okay, right, we've had this particular update. So it's really the number of transactions that's actually been the limiting factor here, rather than just the sort of absolute size and RAM.
Right, you have to calculate the effective fee rate of every transaction you by analyzing all of its ancestor relationships and everything, and it can get very complex. Like some CPFP transactions have tens of ancestors or descendants, and it's this huge tree-shaped cluster.
Can we talk about the thing that we're not allowed to talk about? What was that?
What are we not allowed to talk about?
Gloria said I can't talk about it. So.
Okay.
She's
I was like looking at my phone to retweet the stream, and then I just heard, "Oh, we're not allowed to talk about that," and now I just want to talk about it.
No, Gloria said I can't talk about this. So.
Okay, but it's publicly out there, so do your own research.
Now you got me curious.
I just yeah.
Like
you weren't thinking about this, Marty. I was thinking. By the way, Marty, we have Ted in the studio watching. He doesn't want to join, but
shout out to Ted.
He's watching. Yeah, huge ride or die freak.
Thank you for the book.
Ted, did you bring this, or is this from someone else? That's from Rod.
So this congestion was caused by something. I mean, we've already established that we're ordinals,
caused by shitcoiners.
Agnostic. But that was the weird thing about this week. Is I do want to talk about like the BRC20 stuff, because it didn't really make sense to me, because a lot of the minting of these coins, people were creating 546 sat UTXOs and paying a fee. In the newsletter, I cited one that was like 77.2x the worth of the UTXO.
Well, that's because that's the dust. That's the dust limit for relays.
Yeah, we
so
talked
they did the bare minimum to inscribe a text. Basically, it's a text inscription that's just a human readable JSON inscription.
Yeah,
is what the BR. That's like my basic understanding of.
It's a very inefficient way of.
It's inefficient, but it's human readable and it's meme worthy, and degens are going to degen. Like
that's what I'm trying to get at, though. Like, how sustainable is this type of action? Because you're paying more in the fee than the UTXO you're creating is actually worth. So they spend a lot of money to do all of this. Like, is this a stress test that simply ends because it gets too expensive? Like, you'd have to imagine that the people minting these tokens are willing to spend more in fees than the UTXO is worth, because they think they're going to make money on the back end than to even transfer.
It seems like the cycle of shitcoinery is accelerating. Like back in the day, it was like a 4-year cycle for the new type of shitcoins. Like you had people forking Bitcoin Core, making like Litecoin, Dogecoin, all that stuff. Then you had Ethereum come out, and people were issuing the ERC20 tokens, so that accelerated it. I mean, now it feels like every week there's a new flavor of shitcoin. It's like first we had inscription or ordinals and inscriptions. Now BRC20. Next week it's going to be the new trendy
it's like
shitcoin.
The Jurassic Park quote or whatever. Like life finds like shitcoiners find a way. It's just like constant.
Printing money is not going to go out of style anytime soon.
Well, Marty, I mean, it basically comes down to like, is the individual token worth more than the fees, right? Because the token is completely external to the Bitcoin blockchain. Like the value that the degens put to that token, and probably on an individual token project, like everything else, will trend to zero in terms of Bitcoin. But that doesn't mean they don't just release another token project that maybe then has its own pump cycle that can counteract, whatever their fee costs are. But yeah, I mean, that's the general premise, right? The general premise is there's a cost to transactions. So if you're doing something that does not make economic sense, you will run out of money, and it will naturally handle itself without kind of a centralized entity that can be pressured or corrupted that chooses which transaction is valid and which transaction isn't. Like that is literally the reason we have a fee market and finite block space and all these mechanisms in place in Bitcoin. And it in this case, it worked as designed, right? Like whatever these first set of tokens was, it seems like they've spent a shit ton of money and they haven't really made much out of it. So we're starting to see pressure come down. And I would say, just to add on top of this, is like, we are never, when billions of people use Bitcoin, there is going to be immense fee pressure. There's going to be immense block space demand, but we will never get to the point. We will get to the point where all of our tools and around Bitcoin are very efficient and they work well in sustained high fee markets, but it doesn't happen until we have sustained high fee markets. Like you start to see tools break, you start to see the pain points, you start to see real incentives for people to fix them when we start to have these kind of fee pressure points. And, you know, the best case scenario is that we see them happen in spikes in the beginning, because people kind of just get their face whacked and they just realize, fuck, I need to figure this shit out, whether they're builders or users, right? Like the builders, I mean, we saw with Muun Wallet, a lot of us have said for many years that Muun Wallet was going to break as soon as there was any kind of high fee market. And that's exactly what fucking happened. Like Muun Wallet got attacked.
Phoenix.
It broke. Phoenix actually handled it pretty well. Phoenix like handled the situation pretty well. It was like built for that kind of scenario to a degree. But we start to see a lot of pain points happen. We start to see coin joins get very expensive, right? We start to see people be like, oh shit, I need to know what like UTXOs are in coin control, and I need to actually consolidate some transactions in a privacy focused way. And like, so both on the builder and the user side, when this pressure happens, people kind of, they touch the stove, right? And they realize like, I need to figure out my shit before this becomes sustained. And when we have these little spikes, it's best case scenario, because then they actually have a low fee environment to kind of experiment and improve their situation, rather than try and do that at 100 sat per byte or 200 sat per byte or 400 sat per byte. Like that would be best case scenario. But you should, to any freak listening to this, like you should assume at any given time that like Catan gets fucked and none of his transactions ever get confirmed, and you're going to have to pay high fees. And like, are you ready for that situation? Because I will say, like, obviously I've been a broken record about this. I mean, I was pretty prepared, but I was not, you know, fully prepared. And every time this kind of thing happens, it just smacks you into reality.
Yeah. And
Has anyone checked on Catan recently?
I've just been ripping Catan personally.
Parker Lewis is apparently listening live, and he's texting me from beyond this wall right
Tell
here.
him to join.
I'm trying to join.
Is he afraid you're going to shoot him?
He's afraid. Well, he got mad that we're saying that we are agnostic about ordinals. And wants to
I think that was a little bit too generous. That was Marty's terminology.
Agnostic. Well, it wasn't mine.
We're throwing Marty under the bus.
I think Wiz threw it out there before we hit record, and then I ran with it. But no, these things are shitcoins. Like I would not buy them. I would not purchase them. I would not put any value in them. Maybe agnostic's not the right word, but there's literally nothing we can do about it. Like they are valid transactions. I think they will get priced out in the long run by economic transactions that will be far more valuable than any of the BRC20 tokens that somebody wants to spin up. I would not.
Yeah, freedom money will be the most valuable use case. Like that is, I strongly believe that. And I would say, I don't know if, it's important for people to realize that all of these proposals, there's been a lot of complaining on Twitter. There's been a lot of people saying it's an attack on Bitcoin. There's been a lot of proposals on the relay layer on how to deal with this. The relay layer doesn't fix shit. Like people will just submit directly to mining pools. Then you just have horrible fee estimation. So like if someone above my pay grade has some kind of fix that does not centralize the network, and I do not think it exists, that only blocks inscriptions, be my guest, propose it. I do not think that exists. The relay layer stuff does not solve anything. It only makes the problem worse. And I think ultimately every shitcoin is going to trend to zero, like every other asset. You can find solace in that. And specifically with ordinals, like we've said this in the past, the way ordinals ownership is tracked is completely external to the Bitcoin blockchain. It is not enforced by Bitcoin's censorship resistant guarantees. And I think ultimately people will realize eventually, after a lot of retail gets wrecked, unfortunately, that ordinal theory is just complete bullshit, and that you're not actually transferring ownership of any of these inscriptions. Like it's the inscriptions are protected by Bitcoin censorship guarantee when they're inscribed into the Bitcoin blockchain, but the actual transfer of them is through that bullshit ordinal theory.
But I mean, how many times have we seen this layer 2 shitcoins implemented on top of Bitcoin, right? I mean, even in the early days, you had like counterparty tokens or Omni layer.
Yeah.
I mean, even BISC's BSQ token is like its own colored coin.
Yeah.
How many colored coin projects were there over the years? And ordinals are just like the latest trendy new type of layer 2 shitcoin.
But with counterparty, you actually was like sending a Bitcoin transaction to transfer ownership, right? You weren't using like this ordinal theory.
You had to burn Bitcoin to create a counterparty token.
I still to this day don't really understand how counterparty works.
You burn.
Did
Bitcoin.
it also have like an external ordinal theory type of situation?
I mean, every shitcoin layer on top of Bitcoin is unique in its own way, I guess, but they all implement the same thing of just printing tokens out of thin air and hyping them as being more valuable than the underlying 546 sats that you represented, right?
So what I understand of the BRC20, and I mean, there's no BRC19, right? Or 18 or 17. So they literally just pulled that out of thin air.
Well, it's because of ERC20.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, isn't that just an indication of the space and, what they're trying to do? But, from what I understand, they effectively have to mint, and they've chosen because Bitcoin has 21 million. They want to have 21 million tokens themselves, so they can mint apparently 1,000 of these in every transaction. And therefore, they have to create 21,000 transactions to be able to then create 21 million tokens. So they've all been trying to compete with each other because there's, Poop Coin and all these different named coins,
like
which
Kiki coin, right?
Yeah, which are trying to effectively compete with each other to be the most important BRC20 token. And obviously, the ones that get minted first are the ones that perhaps will rise to the top. So that's really, I think, the reason we've seen the fee rate is actually because the creators of the tokens are trying to mint them as fast as they can. And
do you happen to know if they've minted all 21 million now, and that's why the fees are coming down?
I don't know, but perhaps that is the reason. Yeah,
because it seems like it just suddenly stopped. So I'm guessing they hit some limit.
Yeah, I mean,
perhaps they ran out of money. Looking
at the the fee chart, hash value, hash price, and the fees, this seems very unnatural just looking at the chart, which you can pull up now. Got it on Brains.
Don't worry, Marty. Next week there's going to be a whole new flavor of shitcoins. They put the fees up to 1,000 sats per VByte.
They're just going to make sure that it clears so that I can lose my bets, and then they're just going to start afresh.
That's exactly what they've been doing.
That's the strategy.
They're going to let like 3 or 4 blocks clear, empty blocks. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at the height on the 8th, so 3 days ago, the average transaction fee as a percentage of the block reward was 76.4% or 4.77 Bitcoin. Like we mentioned earlier, there were a few blocks that the fee reward surpassed the subsidy of 6.25 Bitcoin. So it's very interesting. But again, I think
nice little stimulus for miners.
Yeah, no, it's been, as somebody with A6 plugged in, I have not pun intended, I've not minded the revenue bump.
No, I mean, they like that. It shows the beauty of Bitcoin's incentive structure, right? Like if shitcoiners want to use Bitcoin, they literally have to pay for Bitcoin security.
Yeah, well, it's all
beautiful.
This all brought up the whole security budget debate. Like, is the security budget?
It's funny.
Does it
it's always one extreme or the other.
Yeah.
Right. It's always like, oh no, we're gonna have to rewrite the consensus rules.
It's the same people too. The same people FUD Bitcoin on transaction fees being too low and transaction fees.
They're never happy.
Too high.
There's no Goldilocks level of transaction fees.
No. And then of course there's the second meta layer, which says, the Bitcoin community is split. It's divided on this issue, and really it's just a few sort of people that create the noise. And then we have this sort of concept that somehow the Bitcoin community, there is very vague concept of that anyway. But just the idea that, you know, a whole lot of people are sitting on one side of the fence and a whole lot of people are sitting on the other. Well, I'm just not sure that's the case.
No. Yeah, it's almost like the Ethereum crowd and the journalists are like, pick a side, like what side are you on? It's like, like it's somewhat predictable. Like this stuff can happen. The network will react. Fees will increase and price people out. It's the way it's supposed to work. Parker Lewis
if you were around in 2017, what is Parker saying?
Parker Lewis is refusing to come in the studio, but Matt, he wants me to know, wants you to know that Mempools will clear again.
Well, noted, Parker. I'm glad you're on the record for that. If you want to bet, just text Marty, and then Marty can let me know if you want to bet.
You can just text you. That's your number too.
I know, but I just like that we're talking through you, so he can text you. Yeah, no. If you were around in that was my thought. If you were around in 2017, I think none of this surprised you. But I think it's also important for us to realize if we're around in 2017, it's important to realize that this is a great learning experience for people that are more recent than that. Most people aren't going to go and read the block size war, which they should, but most people will not. So it's kind of like how everyone was surprised they got rugged on FTX because they weren't around for Gox, or they weren't around for the 10 other rugs that happened. These learning experiences, kind of like history will keep repeating itself, and you know it can be frustrating as someone who's been around for a while, but then it's also important to realize look, there's no way that new people would realize this on their own. And there is value in constantly repeating the lessons that were learned and making it clear and concise to the new people on how these systems actually work.
Yeah, no, that's one thing. I think people who are relatively new and weren't around like 2017, it's what's happened over the last week is very similar to what happened back then, because back then Laurent from OXT.me, now officially with Samurai, did really good research series back in 2017 called Bitcoin's Moby Dick, where he basically dove into the chain data. And it was very similar back then, where somebody was sending a bunch of dust transactions of UTXOs worth 546 sats, and that was creating congestion in 2017. And then eventually it just got too expensive. The don't want to call it an attack. The person trying to congest the network simply ran out of money, was unable to send more dust UTXOs.
Wasn't it Bitmain that was...
There was
like Bitmain and Roger.
There was multiple.
It's like the Bcash contingent.
There was also like a wallet provider, 2Coin wallet or something like that. That was adding to it.
But they might have just got paid by the other guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you're like mining, if you're a mining pool and you have 35% of the hash rate or more, and you're spamming these high fee transactions, it's almost in your interest to do it, because you're going to get so much of that fee revenue back. You're probably almost going to break even or something. So
because you boost fees on
for
other
all other
people
transactions, right?
Your fees are actually no cost to you because you're just mining yourself.
Yeah, that's where the game theory.
Unless another mining pool gets it. That's why it needs to be. If it's centralized, that's the case. If it's not, because like Jihan in 2017, maybe he directly controlled 40% of the hash, but he indirectly controlled like 70% because he had his like Chinese cartel of buddies that like they all went and got tea together all the time. So in that situation, when you indirectly control 70% of the hash, you start boosting fees, and it's pretty much no cost to you.
But also, if someone else does value a transaction higher than even your own kind of false transaction or spam transaction, if you like, if they end up bidding you or outbidding you, then ultimately you're not having to pay that cost at all.
Especially at that time, the fee suggestion algorithms were very naive, and everyone was just using Bitcoin Core, and it was overpaying by.
Who has the best fee estimation now?
I don't know. Let me think about that.
Blockchair? I think Wiz said Blockchair.
It was actually the 2017-2018 drama, which led us to start the Mempool open source project. And so it's very humbling now that the whole community is using it and backing it and supporting it. And we take the responsibility of providing reliable fee estimates very seriously. So,
well, we appreciate you. We're grateful that you exist.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, it's the default on Sparrow for a reason, right? The
Mempools space.
Correct. It's by far the most sane fee estimation, and Wiz is quite right. Bitcoin Core still tends to overestimate the fees, and if you're using, if you change the configuration on Sparrow to use your own server, that's really going to use the node of the server, and that node will be Bitcoin Core, which means you're likely to be overpaying on your fees if you just use that fee estimation. So, what Bitcoin Core does, it tends to be quite conservative. It tends to keep the fees sticky at a higher level if they go up, and they don't come down as fast, whereas Mempool.space is much more reactive to what's going on, and as a result, you'll end up paying less.
And that goes back to the RBF debate. Is the beauty of RBF is you can make more, you have a more efficient market, because I can make a bid that is a lower fee, and then if I need to, I can always boost it in the future, rather than pre-RBF. Like if I basically have to, if I really need that transaction to go, I have to overestimate by 20% or something, just to make sure that, blocks don't come in slower at that period. A bunch of new transactions don't come in, and then you just get left behind. Like people forget. I mean, people don't forget after this week, but before this week, people forget, like in 2017, there were so many situations where it would just run away from you. It was like, okay, like 22 sats per byte is gets me into next block. And then all these transactions come in, maybe blocks come in a little bit slower due to probability. And then, you're waiting 6 weeks because you literally picked the highest fee to get into the next block, and it just ran away from you. And with RBF, you can change that on the fly, and you can stay more conservative on the low end rather than conservative on the high end.
That's true. Back in the day, you could only CPFP it. That was like your only tool.
Yeah,
CPFP is brutal.
Yeah, I mean, the one downside to CPFP is that you're increasing the overall size of that thing you're trying to boost, because now you're adding a second transaction, and that second transaction obviously adds to the size. So now, your divisor becomes bigger.
Right.
Your
Just
denominator.
To the freaks that don't know what CPFP is, it's child pays for parent, which is a very rare thing in our society. But it's when you take a change transaction that goes back to your wallet, and then you send that out as a new transaction with a very high fee, and then the bundle of the two transactions, that first transaction plus that change that went to your wallet, the bundle of those two, you have an effective fee rate. Actually, Mempool.space is really great that it actually shows you the effective fee rate. With Sparrow, does Sparrow tell me the effective fee rate before I press send?
Yeah, so it's a little bit hidden in that the sense you have to hover over it. But if you do a CPFP, in other words, you have an unconfirmed transaction in your transactions tab, and you click on the CPFP button, you go to the send tab, you'll see a little label there that says CPFP. You hover over that, and that will show you the effective fee rate.
Because in most wallets, you're just shooting in the blind. So you just pick like a really high fee for the child, and then you're like, fuck, didn't put enough. Yeah. Or fuck, I put way too much. Like you can't, like the human mind can't conceptualize what fee rate I need to put on for the burden of two transactions in terms of data.
Yeah.
I think another thing that most wallets is missing is the minimum fee rate or the purge rate.
Agreed.
And even in BISC for many years, like it was possible to set like a 1 or 2 sat per VByte transaction when the minimum fee rate was 5 or 10, and you would just be screwing up your own wallet because you'd try to do a low fee withdrawal and you think, oh, I'm not in a hurry, I'll just use 1 sat per VByte, and then this transaction cannot be broadcast to the Bitcoin network because it has such a low fee. And then you want to do a BISC trade, and so you're spending the change output of that withdrawal transaction, but that also can't be broadcast because the parent transaction doesn't exist in any mempool on the network, and you wreck the whole BISC trade network, and the mediators and the arbitrators and support would be scrambling to help everyone fix their wallets. So that's one of the main things we put on Mempool Space is that no priority fee rate, where like even if you're, that's like the Catan rate, like even if you're not in a hurry.
The Catan rate is 1 sat per byte forever. He's dying on that hill.
He's under the hill. He's but that's kind of the whole point, is that you can't always use 1 sat per byte, right? It will be purged or rejected. So you have to look at the no priority.
But your mempool won't purge it.
Well, that's because I have a very large custom. I mean, yes. But most default size.
And don't you think like most mining pools will just have a very large custom mempool?
You would think that, right? You would think.
Okay, well, maybe not now, but like in a sustained high fee market,
It goes back
which
to
we
the get
should have
block
eventually.
template.
Shouldn't they have a very large
There's a balance, right? Because you don't want to have this massive mempool, because then the get block template is going to take several minutes to run. And so there's a balance, and the default is 300 megabytes. Maybe if you've got a beefy server, you might increase that to 500 or a gigabyte, but you're more incentivized to have to not have stale blocks and lose, hundreds of thousands.
But even if they have another mempool, like they can have two mempools.
Yes,
they
two
can have
nodes.
One mempool that is very lean for their get block template,
Yes.
and then they can even sneaker net it over from the other mempool that's like their archival mempool, that they're like, okay, so the rates go down, and then they're like, let's see which transactions were purged that we can then mine and make money off of.
Yeah, that's very common request actually, is since my mempool is large and reliable, people will actually ask me for just a copy.
Wiz compensates with his large mempool, by the way.
Jesus.
Well, anyway, Sparrow also has that below minimum label. If you choose your fee rate too low and it's below the sort of rate at which transactions are being dropped from the node that you are connected to, it will also let you know. So it's important to consider that. And I've had quite a few support requests the last few weeks. People trying to broadcast too low. Their node doesn't accept it, and that's usually the reason.
But I love the slider bar in Sparrow for like the fee
selection.
That's like the best implementation of that I've seen, and all wallets should copy that design, because it's just the correct way to do it. Changing the colors and enforcing the minimum and saying this is the reasonable.
You have the little graph that's updating and shit.
Yeah. So that'll just show you the graph of your own node's mempool, not the mempool.space one all the time, because mempool.space has all the transactions, and the node you're connected to, if it's your own node, likely just has the 300 megs.
Yeah, another really popular API is our post-transaction API. So I don't know if you.
Yeah, so what Sparrow does is, if it's connected to Tor, every transaction will either be broadcast through mempool.space or blockchain.info, and it just randomly chooses one. And that's obviously the most private way you can broadcast. I think, Matt, you often talk about this, but when you're retrieving data about your wallet, you want to be connected to your own node.
Right.
But when you're sending, it's actually the opposite. You want to be sending from as random a non-connected to you node as you can.
Very frustrating nuance.
Very frustrating, very confusing. A lot of people are like, that's crazy. I don't like the sound of that. I've had that conversation a lot.
But you want your transaction to be like lost in the noise of thousands of other transactions being broadcast from that single point.
Right. Yeah, and it's actually become more of a thing recently. We had that research done, I forget by who, but it was of a certain entity that was starting to look like it was creating a lot of nodes with, we assume, the intent of understanding who was broadcasting what.
Right, you try and have a bunch of malicious nodes so you get a better picture of the network graph.
It's kind of like a consumer privacy VPN service. If one of their servers has a few hundred people connected to it, they're all essentially mixing their internet traffic together in that server.
Right. Yeah.
And Mempool Space is kind of like providing the same service, where we're mixing everyone's transactions together and broadcasting them through our.
You're trusting the service, like the VPN provider. You're trusting the service with your privacy.
But in this case, you're using Tor, so it's not really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you do, but yeah, you're trusting the service with your privacy, and then externally you're getting. Because you can connect to that ClearNet, right?
True, yes. And it's probably one of our most popular APIs, and a lot of wallets like Bisq especially will just always broadcast, because it doesn't hurt to broadcast to multiple servers. So like even if you broadcast to Blockstream or to whoever else has this API at the same time, doesn't hurt it, and it probably increases some entropy or.
True.
Yeah, you see people getting
with the chain analysis.
You see people getting really creative with this, like Ben the Carman, we talked about it a few weeks ago. He created a way to use Nostr relays to broadcast a transaction to mempool.space. Spin up a new private public pair.
That seems
sort of like a redundancy.
Well,
it's like a fallback if Tor is not working. Like that's another avenue you could take.
Wasn't there like Dandelion?
You don't seem too convinced.
It's actually Carlos, I just see in the comments has he's named it. It's called Linking Line, I believe, and it was 0x B10C who was doing some reporting on that. So
that was the entity that was running the
Right.
malicious nodes, trying to
Yeah, I remember
track.
he asked, like, check how many connections you have from these IP addresses. Sure enough, I had like 12 connections or something.
yeah,
Right.
they do.
Dandelion is a proposed mitigation strategy in terms of broadcasting from your own node if your own node's on ClearNet. If your own node's on Tor and you broadcast from your own node, you're in a much better situation in general.
But I think that the trade-off with the Dandelion is that you need to have like one mempool per peer, which
it never got implemented, right?
Yeah, and because of that, right? It's just having just one mempool in your node is hard enough because of the get block template issue, like we said. But to have 20 peers,
you have like parallel mempools.
Yeah, because otherwise, when someone broadcasts to you, you have to pretend like you don't already know about that transaction or something like this. And so I guess that's why it was never implemented.
I thought it was more data requirements, like it's
that too,
using more bandwidth because you're
making a ton of trade-offs, both
you're like constantly relaying
and network and everything. Yeah,
and then it's still not perfect by any means.
I mean, the Tor thing to mempool space is or Blockstream
it's pretty clean.
It's pretty clean, yeah.
As long as you don't get your door kicked in.
Door kicked in?
I don't know. Just like, I mean, you're a centralized entity, right? Like, obviously, like the beauty of a proposal like Dandelion is like, let's fix this while maintaining decentralization,
hard,
right?
Yeah.
Which is a very difficult task. There's a lot of times where you can be very pragmatic about something by introducing some kind of external centralization.
Yeah, sure.
And in this case, that's that. And like we see that with Craig when the default Sparrow, if you don't run your own node, he's like, I've curated four high reputation Electrum nodes for you to connect to, right? And it's like, oh, is MZ going to spy on me? Is Blockstream going to spy on me? But like, that is obviously not censorship resistant or decentralized in any way.
It's a good balance. Like,
pragmatic.
of course, you should run your own node, but if you don't have your own node, these guys are, I trust these guys, so it's like a web of trust kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah,
beware, freaks. There's a lot of nuance to all of this.
You hit them with it.
What do you guys think the last couple of weeks has taught us about Lightning adoption? You think more people are going to be urgently opening up channels and trying to move a lot of their transactional traffic there in response to this?
I think it highlights that when mempools have got a bit of space, an on-chain transaction is often a great choice. And there's a trade-off if you go to any of these other layers, and that trade-off gets more attractive the more kind of mempools fill up. So if you're having channels that are randomly closing in this environment, it's a pain point, and maybe it makes you kind of question whether Lightning is ready for this kind of thing. But it makes it more attractive if you are having to pay these transactions and you're outbidding people that are doing crazy things. It forces you down. You're looking at other options, I think, at this point.
I think Lightning is obviously useful in a high fee environment. At the core of Lightning, you can think of it as a protocol for batched Bitcoin transactions, right? So you're paying one on-chain fee and you're able to do thousands of transactions. It's obviously compelling. But I think it also highlights that most of the Lightning implementations are not robust in a sustained high fee environment. And they should be, the tireless open source contributors that contribute to those projects should be very grateful if this is just a spike and not a sustained fee market. And we need to make these implementations more robust in those situations. Now, I will say that there's like almost no shot in hell that they will be robust in these situations without experiencing the pain points and getting absolutely battered. But the perfect example is what we've talked about on Rabbit Hole Recap a lot, which a lot of people have not talked about, but people experienced this week, which is just force closes during the high fee environment, right? Like there was a bot on Nostr that just lists force closes, Lightning force closes during the fee market spike. And like people were getting, their channels were just like the Lightning implementations were falling out of sync or something. I don't know. It's above my pay grade. But their channels without any user interaction, right? Like let's say me and Craig have a channel with each other, or I've experienced this with two nodes that I control myself. We don't actually close the channel ourselves, but for whatever reason, that channel gets force closed. and we pay a very high fee rate in that situation, and then we can't use that channel again, right? So that's just one little aspect. But also, I mean, I saw people complaining and realizing for the first time that if they're trying to onboard new people to Lightning, like, of course they have to pay a high on-chain fee when in that environment. Like, that part is probably unavoidable, but wallets and tools and like the way they actually show that to the user could be much better, right? You're in this current situation, fees are high, fees might go down, maybe pay a lower fee for an open, and kind of how do you actually tell the user that without them watching a 2-hour BTC sessions video, right? Like, you shouldn't have to onboard onto the best money we've ever seen. Like, you shouldn't have to watch a YouTube video or read a book or like go through like 20 pages. Like, personal responsibility will always be more difficult, but you need the tooling to be there. So the UX is like a nice flow for that user in a sustained high fee market, because that's exactly when you want to use Lightning the most.
I think in practice, it's going to be more comparable to maybe ISPs or telecoms, in the sense that not everybody is going to run their own ISP. Not everybody's going to run their own Lightning node. There's going to be more of an Uncle Jim model or some community Lightning node where you have some relationship and you make some trade-offs. And the node operator will be educated and, reliably operating this node on beefy hardware that can handle whatever computational or network requirements, and they'll probably charge a reasonable fee for this service. But
yeah, I mean, I think we're already there. Like, that is, I think that's proven. Like, Lightning as a use case, as an interoperable layer between custodians, is incredibly proven. There's massive product market fit for that. It works, right? Now the question is, and the influencers are completely unaware of this because they keep selling Lightning as like this awesome sovereign freedom tool, is like, that's what it comes down to. Is like, we haven't proven that out yet, in my opinion. We haven't proven out that, it's going to be very accessible for people to run their own Lightning node, to use their own Lightning node, to operate their own channels. And the key point being accessible there. And I think when we say accessible in the terms of this, is like, if we're going to have 4 billion more people use Bitcoin, and they're going to be using Lightning, it has to be accessible on mobile. Like, that it is, someone opens up their phone because they don't have a computer and they open one of these apps, like, it needs to be robust in that situation. And I'm not sure if I don't think that's proven yet. I think that's yet to be proven. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. I'm not trying to be like a asshole or a doomer here on that situation. Like, it's still open.
Well, that's just the reality, right? The cost of operating a node is only going to go up. And it was kind of a weird, unusual case that we were able to use Raspberry Pi. I mean, it's great that you can use a Raspberry Pi, but in reality, you have to deal with these high fee environments. You have to deal with denial of service attacks, or other bugs in the software. And if you go to someplace like El Salvador, they don't have like hot water, let alone like a computer or a Raspberry Pi or, reliable internet. Like you said, and even a smartphone is kind of like a luxury for some people there. When you pay someone in El Salvador for the bottle of water or whatever, they just have like a piece of paper with a QR code on it. And the way they verify that you sent the funds, they look at your phone, So is everyone going to run a node? Hopefully, yeah, eventually, yeah, but it's going to have to be hella optimized by then for that to even have a chance of working. And what happens if you want to close 1 billion channels at once, right? Like, that's just going to be impossible.
It's going to be hot
with the block size limit. Like, what are the fees going to be then?
It's going to be a great rabbit hole recap that week.
Yeah, I mean, I think that many of these issues, it's just a matter of time. It's, if there's one thing it is good not to bet against, it is the ingenuity of humans to come up with answers to these kind of questions on a long enough time frame. I think we're talking.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm talking to Logan.
We're kind of looking at a really short time frame here. I know we kind of think it's long, right? Because it seems the Bitcoin world is full of news and there's so much going on. But many of the takes that I see are just, give it some time. Just like it's
patience.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen. All of these things are being worked on. That forced close issue, I was looking at a PR, well, maybe not a PR, issue on LND this week, which was kind of going into at least one of the reasons why it could be going on. So people are actively looking at that, and trying to figure out, well, what's causing it.
Well, now they definitely are.
Now they definitely are, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to pull this up, the UTXO count. Sorry for using blockchain.com. I couldn't find. count of UTXOs.
Do you have
anywhere
this
else.
stat on Mempool.space?
I don't think we have the UTXO count chart,
But
but
I think
it would be probably very easy to.
Well, this is
Yeah,
one.
I mean, it's all BRC20 tokens, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
I
like
think it went up by several million just the past few weeks.
You can see it goes vertical almost.
it went from 88 million to 94.4. That's like a 6 million out of 84. Was that? It's like 8% growth in a couple of weeks. The
That's a lot
UTXO
of
set.
shitcoins.
Yeah. This is something to consider when you're talking about the ability to run nodes and the cost of doing so into the future.
Hopefully Moore's law keeps up. RAM gets cheaper, CPUs get cheaper.
I mean, this is why we have the block size limit, right?
Yes.
Or at least part of the reason.
But look, have any nodes fallen over the actual node? not as far as I know. The actual Bitcoin Core software itself has handled it fine. Even if it was just running on a Pi, as far as I know, nodes have not gone down, and I think that's a great test, right? We're seeing a particular metric, the number of transactions, increase to levels that we've never had before, and things are still running along fine. So, it's important to do these tests, but it's also important to observe the results, and that's an important result.
Yeah, I'm looking at
Yeah, like Murch said it.
Bitnodes.io. It doesn't look like there's been any material drop off in the reachable nodes.
Well,
according to
so
the site.
for regular Bitcoin, for Bitcoin transactions that are transferring Bitcoin, like their point is to send Bitcoin and transact in Bitcoin, there's a very strong incentive to consolidate UTXOs, and that is fee burden. And that is what has helped us keep the UTXO set down. Now, with these tokens and these shitcoins that are on Bitcoin now, they don't necessarily have that same incentive. So, they're going to push up the UTXO set. And it's a way above my pay grade of any kind of mitigation there. I don't know if there is a mitigation there. But ultimately, like, that's the main incentive we use in Bitcoin, right? Is if your own because you can't assume anyone in the Bitcoin network is going to operate in a benevolent way as charity or anything. Like, everything needs to be set up incentive-wise that it's greed. And ultimately, like, the way transaction fees work is if you have less personal UTXOs under your own control, you will have a lower fee burden going forward. And that is the strongest incentive we have to reduce the UTXO set.
Yeah, maybe that's an interesting externality that comes from the last couple of weeks is you have a lot of exchanges or large transactors on the network. They're like, holy shit, I had a bunch of unspendable UTXOs at one point during the height of the fee pressure. Like, I got to have a better consolidation policy. I mean,
we saw Binance was having trouble getting their consolidation confirmed. And then in 2017, we saw Coinbase was basically underwater in a bunch of their transactions because they hadn't done consolidation, and they fortunately were able to do it after the 2017 spike ended. But yeah, that should definitely be some pressure. And then also the other thing to keep in mind is we do have this capability of pruning nodes, which is this idea that your own node prunes transactions that it doesn't necessarily need going forward. And you can do the same exact thing here with the BRC20 stuff, because if you're not transacting in them, like, there's no reason for you to store those indefinitely.
That's for confirmed transactions, right? The unspent set, you need to keep the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. The unspent set is no. I mean, if you can prune
witness information, you can.
Yeah.
So you can prune. You only need the witness information to be able to verify things, right? And once that's done, right, you don't actually need that information for anything else. You still need the UTXO information, obviously, because you need to be able to tell whether you can spend a thing or whether it's a double spend or whatever have you. But the kind of witness data and all of this BRC20, all of this kind of inscription stuff is encoded into the witness that you can drop. That's really just required to verify the chain.
And none of like, even if you don't prune your node, even if you just run a normal node on a Raspberry Pi, like Marty said, like, there was no nodes falling off the network. The only thing that really happens, the only consequence is your node just gets a little slow. And if your use case is just using it for your own wallet, that's probably totally fine. It was only
Right.
Like, the mining pools nodes that got slow. Okay, that's going to result in some money left on the table in the form of stale blocks. Or if you're an exchange operator, you might have some slow node related issues with deposits or withdrawals going through. But for the most part, those enterprises are using very beefy hardware and can mitigate those issues. They have ops teams to manage that. At the end of the day, your node will be fine, even in this high fee, high transaction count environment. It just might get a little slow.
It's been fun. Just going through all the drama that it started. That's the other thing, like people saying, "Oh, Bitcoin's broken, it's not working." It's like it's actually working exactly as designed. Which is funny. That like we were saying earlier, like fees you can have scenarios for extended period of time where the mempools are relatively empty. Then as soon as then fees are too low, the security budget's never gonna sustain itself when the subsidy gets slashed low enough, and then boom, you finally get a fee market developing. They're like, oh, Bitcoin doesn't work, it's too expensive. It's pricing out the poor. It's just the way it goes, freaks. Should we get to the list?
The list doesn't really matter.
Yeah, should we keep riffing? What else should we talk about?
I mean, I made like a preliminary list because we were rushing over here anyway.
The banks.
One of the interesting things.
Go ahead, Craig.
One of the interesting things about all this is that we have all these debates, and as Bitcoiners, of is the block subsidy enough? Some people think we need to have a tail emission, all of that kind of thing. Then we have other debates of what is spam? Is a BIP47 op return code spam on the network? I think that
really sensitive to the spam comment.
Yeah, so I mean, if you just look at the last week, and I think it's one of the nice things is it's just all of this inscription stuff has just blown a lot of those arguments out the water. Now we have a completely different angle from which to consider those, which I don't think was in anyone's minds before.
You know what it is that people don't like it when things change. They got very used to this 1 sat per VByte environment. They made business models around it. And now it's suddenly 500 sats per VByte, and they're pissed. No, we have to fix Bitcoin. This is a problem, right? And when it's the other way around.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is a lot of these old arguments, which have been around for years, right?
No, Craig, we're still going to hear the same thing.
They're going to forget about this.
If Mempools clear, like BIP47 reusable payment codes will still be considered spam. There'll still be a bunch of state coiners that think like collaborative Bitcoin transactions, coin joins, pay joins are spam.
But at the end of the day, there is no should. Or
they can't do anything about it.
There's just the free market.
Cry harder. Like, what the fuck are you going to do about it?
Well, and bring it back to like the whole conversation about like security budget. It's always like weird because you really don't know what the budget is until you're attacked. And I really like, I like Pierre's framing of this. We're seeing the fallacy for those at home not watching. This tweet is up on the screen. We're seeing the fallacy of quote unquote security budget. Fees rise in response to block stuffing, not preemptively as a deterrent, and the subsidy is irrelevant. It's the option to bid up fees going forward that makes Bitcoin censorship resistant, not the value of past mining rewards. We'd see the same in an empty block scenario, though obviously the high fees would be in the mempool until hash rate defected or entered. I like this framing about the quote-unquote security budget. It's just if you want to get your transaction included in the future, you're being censored, you'll just raise the fee, and that provides censorship-resistant quote-unquote security.
Yeah, I agree with it. I agree with that as a concept. There's also something to be said about like a base level security, right? And I mean, it's Twitter, so it's a little bit simplified, probably.
Yeah, the point is that you don't know until the attack happens, and so like.
No, I agree, but like it's important. I think it's important that like, right now we price it in dollars, right? But like priced in cows or priced in, any kind of like hard good that people need in purchasing power. Like the purchasing power of Bitcoin rewards has trended up. Like people, like in Bitcoin terms, it goes down, but in terms of actual raw purchasing power, like I can buy an ounce of water with this reward. that has gone up. And I think that is important. I think that trend will continue. And then on an individual transaction level, you start to see the ability of the end user to choose what his transaction fee is and to raise it if he's getting censored is absolutely integral to the system. But like, we can't have, I mean, not can't, but I just, there's something to be said about the purchasing power going up, right? And here, yeah, the graph you just pulled up, right?
Yeah. Pierre, thanks again. Articulated this in graph form as well, so you can see the orange lines, the reward in sats, and that's obviously going down. And the green line's the purchasing power.
Halves every 4 years.
Yeah. So it is working. Bitcoin's becoming more valuable. Purchasing power is going up. Purchasing power of the mining reward is going up. So the whole debate's so tiresome because it's so esoteric in a way. Like, at some point in the future, are we going to have security? It's like, if Bitcoin's valuable, it will. Getting dragged down.
If people want to transact with freedom, then it will work. And if people just are content with, if the overwhelming, even if the overwhelming majority are content with cuckbucks, it's still going to work. But if everyone in some ridiculous theoretical didn't want to transact with freedom, then we'd have an issue.
Yeah, I think that's a very low likelihood of materializing in the future. That's what this whole debate, people just forget about the difficulty adjustment. It's like, all right, if it's not profitable, miners will fall off. Difficulty will adjust until it is profitable, to include the transaction. So we don't have to beat this dead horse. What was the highlight of the week in Nashville? Got a little bit of FOMO.
The Mempools Summit.
You want to tell them a little bit about the Mempools Summit?
Yeah, let's see. What did we do? I guess we had talks by me and Soft Simon and Murch and Craig here, the rock star. I don't know. I was really jet lagged, so I took a nap for most of the summit, actually. But, I heard it was cool. I heard it was the highlight.
Wow. He didn't nap during his talk, though. And to start it off, before we had the Mempools Summit on Tuesday, we had Craig give a Sparrow workshop, which I thoroughly enjoyed.
My favorite was the panel with Murch and Jay. That was cool.
Yeah, that was a great panel. And so then we had, so Tuesday was Craig's workshop for Sparrow. We had the whole Sparrow team here doing the workshop.
All of them.
All of them, yeah.
Wow, did you have to like charter a big?
We did. We just decided to go for it this time. Get everyone here. It was the only way.
And then we had Bit Devs, and then we had dinner and drinks and whatnot. And then on the next day we had the Mempools Summit during the day, and then we had our monthly open house meetup. That was the same topic. It was great. Just a really good group of people. Great discussions. All of them will be released on the podcast feed if you just search Bitcoin Park in your favorite podcast app. But routinely, like, my favorite part is always just the people who come through, having drinks, having food, just hanging out, talking about the things you can't talk about on air. It's just special. It's special. It makes me extremely optimistic and hopeful and bullish. Meeting people in person. There was a bunch of freaks that I met for the first time in person. It's just great. It's I keep saying the word special, but it's special. It's fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's just, if we look at the, we had Murch, who basically lives every day, it feels, living within a mempool chart. That's basically feels like what he actually does with his life. We had obviously the mempool.space guys, and we had a bunch of great sort of miners as well. We had the grid guys, and had
Harry was here.
So I mean, and if you were worried about the latest the BRC20, the inscriptions thing, the effect on the mempool, if that was a concern, I think you would have left yesterday with it not being a concern. That's kind of my takeout is I would struggle to see how you would get through that day and still be worried about it.
This is insanely perfect because we planned it like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
That Mempools were so fucking packed. The other thing is we had a contingent coming from Dallas on a PJ. There was like a 12-man strong Dallas contingent, which was awesome. I mean, how could you have better timing for a Mempool summit than when people were screaming that, Bitcoin transactions were an attack on the...
Yeah, well, actually, a lot of people accused me of filling up the Mempool.
Did you?
To drum up some...
I mean,
we have to ask him. We have to ask him on air.
Amazing coincidence, wasn't it?
Well, I'd like to expand on like what Craig was alluding to, which is like this fear, because there was a lot of BRC20 stands. Like, we've got the miners on our side. Like, they'll if anybody tries to fork, they're going to go with us because we're providing them so much revenue. But I
think a lot of people who came to the meetup or the Mempool summit, they just want to hear from the core devs or us that it's going to be okay, and they just want to feel warm and fuzzy. It's like, don't worry, Bitcoin has this multi-layer ecosystem.
You should see Wiz was rubbing people's backs to make them feel more comfortable.
No, but I mean, they're kind of like, people are afraid of what they don't understand. And one day the fees are this much and now it's this much. And they're kind of new to Bitcoin and they're like, what's going on, right? And they're asking a lot of, typical newbie questions, which is understandable. And they, we're here to educate the people. That's why we're at Bitcoin Park. And they leave, like you said, feeling less anxious about it than they did when they got here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just a lot of, kind of sane voices just talking through it from a perspective of deep understanding of how the mempool works, how the Mempools work, how the incentive structures within Bitcoin work, and it just kind of, if you listen to all that and you think about it and you consider that we're operating in a free market and people can, if they want to, spend their money on whatever they want, and then you consider that perhaps people are spending money in ways that transfer value from kind of low value activities to higher value ones. Well, you might come to the end of that and be a little less concerned. That's my view on it.
Yeah, it's all going to be okay, freaks. Bitcoin is working exactly as designed, as we've said many times in this episode. But it's funny to see people take advantage of the chaos to try to drive these narratives very quickly.
Dude, if you turn off Twitter, you wouldn't think that though, right? Yeah. It's like Twitter engagement 101, right? Like, we broke Bitcoin, like this, we're more important than Satoshi, like all this shit, right? It's just like Twitter engagement 101. I mean, even on the other side, on the side that maybe was like Bitcoin is working as designed, there was a bunch of tweets I saw that was like, this is the first time in history that transaction fees outperformed block subsidy, which is not true. It happened in 2017 to even bigger extent. But like, those tweets got the most engagement, right? So this is something we talk about on the show a lot, right? Which is that, like, be aware of the flawed, corrupt incentives of social media, right? Which is drive engagement at all costs, hide the truth, right? Just go for provocative statements that like drive divides and get people to press retweet.
Yeah, it was funny watching the people like, oh, this is the first time the subsidy's over the reward, or the fees are over the subsidy. Get taught in real time. Like, no, this happened in 2017. You freaks got to go read the famous Greg Maxwell Bitcoin dev mailing list post, which he popped champagne. That set off some drama on RBTC.
Yeah, but it doesn't even matter, right?
No.
It doesn't even matter because like the comments underneath that were replying to it were not getting that much engagement. And then anyone who like actually tweets it out, the real headline, right, which is, the transaction fees did outpace the subsidy for the first time since 2017, did not get as much engagement, right? So it doesn't, the incentives are flawed. And I guess what I'm going at here is, and this is what you guys are building at Bitcoin Commons, this is what we're building at Bitcoin Park, this is what Bitcoiners are building all around the world in terms of grassroots Bitcoin adoption, is this idea of actual physical interaction. And the incentives in physical interaction are very, very strong, because no one like looks someone in the face and then just says like a flat out engagement troll lie if they ever want to talk to that person again. Right. But on Twitter and on all social media platforms, like that's the case. Like that's and you got to keep going back to the incentives. Like I think most things in our society that are broken are because of broken incentives. And one of the things I find so powerful about Bitcoin and I find so powerful about the free and open source movement is very strong incentives. You fix the incentives and then all of a sudden everything starts to fall into place.
Yeah. Bullish on meat space meetups to drive good discourse. We saw that with the debate, with the Nakamoto Forum debate, the first debate series event. It was just, I really like that format. It was just civil debate of two people taking different sides of an argument that is very heated on Twitter around the energy and what energy source to mine with. And it was very civil. Everybody enjoyed it. I think everybody got a lot of value out of it and walked away with maybe some different perspectives and new angles to think about these problems from. Go to your local Bitcoin community, freaks, or start one if you don't have one.
By the way, there's this really cool website where you can see a list of all Bitcoin meetups in the world on bitcoin-only.com/meetups. If you're looking to join a meetup, there's probably one in your city already. I think just in Germany alone, there's like 40 or 50 of them now. And
Germany did really good job.
Strong.
Very strong.
What else should we talk about? You want to talk about Brad Sherman admitting on Capitol Hill that...
Well, before you do that, you want to just read our Boostagrams? Because maybe there's some jewels in there. I haven't actually read them yet.
There's some good ones.
Will spur a thought that we want to comment on.
Well, shout out to you freaks for the boost last week. Took us back to the #1 show on the charts. We really appreciate it. Let me make sure I have the right one here.
Yeah, we really do, freaks. It keeps us going.
Yeah, I have the right one. Rabbit Hole Recap 251, $10 million for open source projects. Top 4 boost at Eric99, 50,000
I thought the
sats.
boost was $10 million. I was like, okay, retired. We're going to goats and other stuff.
Goats and other stuff. At Eric99, 50,000 sats. What do you think he said, Logan?
I have
Great
no
advice.
idea.
Stay humble, stack sats.
Oh, wow.
And Obex replied to that. Le great
I love that, dude.
advices. Shout out to you, Eric. At Lone Star, 20,000 sats. Damn, excellent podcast. Very happy you enjoyed it, Lone Star. At GNILMA, G Nilma, just say that, 11,111 sats. Boostagram, or excuse me, Palindrome boost. Keep working and keep it real. We will. We're definitely going to keep working. We did not get the $10 million boost, so we're not going to go on the goats and other stuff just yet. We will keep working, and we will keep it real as well. At MJ McMenis, 7,777 sats, another Palindrome boost. 7s across the board. Looking forward to the rants and banter every week. We're looking forward to you enjoying the rants and banter, MJ McMenis. I think that's how you pronounce it. That was the top 4. Nothing really to stoke conversation, though.
Yeah, no spicy hot takes, but thank you, freaks. We appreciate you. Thanks for the support. And by the way, all those sats came through, even though the fee market was really high because it was through Lightning. Although a lot of the users were using custodial Lightning, which is a pain point. But on the receiving side, we were using non-custodial Lightning.
Except for me.
Oh, well, I was.
TFTC is my own node. RHR, just the way it's set up.
Yeah, you need to have it separated. Otherwise, it gets a little bit confusing.
Yeah.
That's why people say, like, I'm flooding Lightning nodes. It's like, I've run 5 of them. Go fuck yourself. Oh, sorry. I'm supposed to not curse as much. I've had multiple parents reach out.
I got an email yesterday. I got an email. Maybe we should talk about that. I had a freak email me about your cursing.
I'm not gonna change my language choices. So maybe Logan should start bleeping. How do we feel about bleeping? Do bleeping solve it, or is that bad for kids too?
I didn't want to bring it up since you brought it up. It's not the first time somebody's reached out to me about your cursing.
It's not the first time. No,
I've gotten a lot better. I used to be bad at it. I've gotten a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I will fucking try, freaks. I'll try.
There are.
I'm not bleeping. F you, Matt.
There are parents with their children listening in cars that just turned off.
Yeah. I had 2 reach out this I guess I cursed a lot this past week. It was higher than usual. But I got a couple this week. Yeah.
I haven't heard.
Should we release?
I haven't heard Craig or
I don't
Wiz
think bleep
or
help.
Orange Surf curse.
Have I cursed a lot this week?
No, you've been good this week.
Yeah.
Is shitcoins a curse word?
No.
That's
I think if your kid's first word is shitcoins, it's like proud moment, right?
Mm.
What if he's like, Daddy, why don't you have any shitcoins? It's like, oh, goddamn.
Re-education.
So what do we?
Anyway, sorry, freaks. I'll work on it, and we'll get Logan to learn how to bleep things.
No, I don't want any bleeping either. That just throws off the show. What else is there to talk about? Interesting in Bitcoin.
Don't you have a list?
Yeah, I did like a minor list because I was trying to prepare having 5 people here.
Speaking of miners, I think this is pretty cool news. We'll see what materializes out of it. But like Marathon signing a deal with was it Abu Dhabi? Yeah, Abu Dhabi announced they're going to do a joint venture to establish the first large-scale emergent Bitcoin mining operations in the Middle East, which I think might be a big claim. I wouldn't be surprised if there are already relatively large-scale mining operations in the Mideast, but
the first one with Poor OPSEC.
Yes, this is, again, interesting because you have an American corporation, publicly traded, doing a joint venture with a country in the Middle East.
Yeah, sovereign nation.
Yeah. So another is
it also goes to, yeah, exactly.
It
goes with our current narrative. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, no, I mean, this is coming on the heels of the news out of the Kingdom of Bhutan that they're doing a joint venture with BitDeer to build out their mining infrastructure, Abu Dhabi. Again, we talked about it last week. The thesis in many Bitcoin circles for many years, over a decade at this point, has been like, if you're going to adopt at the nation state level, those countries who have little to lose and much to gain will likely do it first. And I think this is a confirmation of that. Not that Abu Dhabi is a third world country, but it seems that I think recognize.
The narrative with Abu Dhabi is a little bit different. I mean, it is definitely consistent in this idea that sovereign nations are going to act in a greedy way to protect themselves as Bitcoinization happens. Abu Dhabi is interesting because they're a very energy rich country, right? And it's like, okay, so how if you've been watching at all of those countries in that region, a lot of their policy plans are set up in a way of like, how do we anchor ourselves? Like, how do we plan for the future while we're extracting these resources today? Like, how do we make sure that, Abu Dhabi is a powerhouse in 200 years, 400 years, 600 years? And a lot of it is like bullshit, like city plans where they have like these ridiculous cities of the future. And like, they want to open themselves up to trade and they want to be like the capital of finance of the world. And, maybe they'll have different success rates for that. But if you're an energy rich country, converting your energy to the hardest money that man has ever seen is a very obvious decision. I think it will be a very prudent decision that will play out long term. Now, we've seen energy rich countries that are sanctioned. It's even more obvious for them because they can't easily trade their energy.
Venezuela, Russia.
But I mean, I think all these energy rich nations, like, it's just so obvious. It's like, if you can convert your energy to Bitcoin, a portion of it, and hold it long term, you should be able to reap massive gains.
Yeah, and the way this deal's set up is very heavily in favor of Abu Dhabi. So they set up a joint venture entity with Marathon called Abu Dhabi Global Markets JV entity. And the equity split in that is 80% towards Abu Dhabi and 20% towards Marathon. and this is another thing, like with the game theory too, Marathon, again, going back to the fact that it's a publicly traded company here in the U.S. on NASDAQ, them doing a deal with Abu Dhabi. Like, is there a point in the future if the U.S. government tries to clamp down on Bitcoin here, did they go to Marathon and say, actually, you can't work with Abu Dhabi to do this? Like, or does Marathon entering in this joint venture signal to the government, like, hey, American companies are succeeding in building infrastructure in other parts of the world, which is value accruing back here in the public equity markets? We're like, all right, maybe we should allow this. So it's like this particular partnership is very interesting. Any thoughts, Wiz? Craig? Orange Surf?
Well, I just want to say, first of all, that Abu Dhabi is not a country. It is the UAE is the country. Abu Dhabi is a city within.
Thank God we got Craig here. Who the fuck knows?
But yeah, I mean, it is very interesting. You know, there's a lot of thoughts here. I mean, who owns the miners, right? Is it owned by Marathon? Is it owned by the UAE? I wonder.
Is that how does that, since we have a UAE expert here, is it like, it's like a city state kind of situation?
Yeah.
Like,
So
how does that work?
So the major city that you know everyone's kind of
Dubai,
heard of,
right?
is Dubai, because everyone kind of flies in and out of there, right? But Abu Dhabi, I haven't been there myself, but it's another major city within it. It's obviously a very oil-rich area, and they've got a lot of money to spend, but they've got a very dry climate and not a lot of reasons for people to come there and to create a society and economy under normal conditions. So they're putting a lot of effort into using whatever financial resources they have, those considerable financial resources, to basically prepare themselves as best as they can for a future where maybe, I mean, I don't think this is going to happen anytime soon, but maybe oil is less important. So they kind of really trying to diversify away from being this kind of single resource, country. And certainly mining some Bitcoin and holding that in reserve is a good way to approach that, as well as all the other things that they're doing. So I think
hedge your bets a little bit.
Yeah. I think that it's they're almost taking one resource and just converting it into another, and storing that for the sort of future. So I think it's very much in line with their general approach, which seems to be let's take this one resource we have and just invest it in a number of different areas.
Have you ever been
to the UAE?
Yeah, any of them.
Yeah.
But, so it's Dubai, Abu Dhabi. What else? Is there other ones?
Dota.
Dota. Is that what you said?
Qatar.
Is Qatar also UAE?
No.
Qatar's
so that's
I just sound completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, the World Cup was there, right?
That's right.
Did you guys see that episode of I think it was Garfield, where he puts Odie in the box and sends him to Abu Dhabi? Did you see that one? I know Josh Away Slice is.
I heard there's a growing Bitcoin community in Dubai. Like, I've heard very good things.
Yeah.
Stefan's there.
Yeah.
I think
not a doxed. He admits it.
He admits it. Yeah. And Craig, to your question, like, how's the distribution of the Bitcoin mine going to be split? So the digital assets mined by the ADGM entity will be distributed twice per month and in accordance with the equity ownership. So I guess after all cost and expenditures, the Bitcoin that's left over, Abu Dhabi will get 80% and Marathon will get 20%.
Okay.
Yeah, but then what happens after that?
What do you mean?
Like, do they hold it or do they sell it? That's the real question, right?
Oh, yeah. I imagine they want to hold it. Marathon's definitely holding it. I think they just came out with a PR this week that they still have like 21,000 Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Oh, maybe that's another interesting topic to talk about is Tether. Their treasury report was released this week, and they have a considerable amount of Bitcoin. They added 51,000.
And they have a lot of gold, too.
Gold, a lot of treasuries.
They're basically like operating independent central bank. I think I saw Safe said like they're, as a central bank, they'd be the 25th largest.
Yeah, let me pull that up. Look, I'm putting a picture in Slack too for their balance sheet.
I still don't get, like, they own U.S. treasuries, And like, obviously the US government fucking hates them. Like, so that means they're lending money to the government that hates them.
But the government,
like, I'm not a Tether truther.
Even though they might hate them, they need treasury buying demand desperately right now, so they're not going to turn them away.
I mean, but they did it to Russia, right?
Yeah. I think they're realizing the flaw in that strategic move that they made.
But anyway, like Tether right now is printing money because they're operating a bank that their customers don't expect getting paid interest in a high interest rate environment. So they're just like accruing that 6% or 7% or whatever interest we're at currently on their treasuries. And then they're stacking sats with that and stacking gold. And they're just taking that they're minting fucking money.
Yeah. So they have 53 billion in treasuries, 7.5 billion in overnight repo agreements. Term reverse repo agreements, they have 786 million. They have 7.45 billion in money market funds, 481.35 million in cash and bank deposits, and then 47 million in non-U.S. Treasury bills. And then you get into corporate bonds, 140.6 million. Precious metals is 3.39 billion. Bitcoin, they have 1.5 billion, which again equates to around 51,000 Bitcoin, 2 billion in other investments, and 5.3 billion in secured loans. So balance sheet total is 81.83 billion. Imagine what happens to that if they just hold the big. What was that?
They also have one of the largest lightning nodes on the Lightning Network, I think. In the top.
Are you talking about Bitfinex?
Sorry, yes, Bitfinex. Yes.
Yeah. There's quote unquote separate entities.
My mistake.
Yeah. Yeah, you can just think of Bitfinex and Tether as the same company. I had something on the list that I wanted to. So Tether is like, I don't agree with the Tether truthers. Bitfinex has had me the account that says Tether's going to implode and is the reason Bitcoin is up in price since he sold it $1,000 or whatever. He's had me blocked for like 4 years. He can go bleep himself. But Logan, great job on the bleep. But Tether is, you trust a third party. It's a trusted third party. Tether can rug you at will. Keep that in mind. But it has been impressive that they've basically been running this shadow bank for the amount of years they've been running it.
I'm cheering
incredibly
for
impressive.
Bitfinex and Tether behind the scenes. I want the U.S. government to give them back their Bitcoin that was stolen from them.
They're never going to get that Bitcoin back. But I wanted to talk about, I have it on the list. So like Muun wallet with 2 U's, I've obviously been in a very loud proponent of, because it's a very simple self-custody wallet that lets you pay Lightning invoices. If freaks have been paying attention, I have said many times that their model just does not work in a high fee environment. There was a lot of panic this week. Muun has been getting attacked in this high fee environment because it makes the attacks much easier the way they set up their model. So their model is at rest when you're using Muun wallet. All your funds are held self-custody in your wallet. And then if you receive on Lightning or if you send on Lightning, there's a custodial swap that happens to pay that Lightning invoice or to receive on Lightning. And that portion has been under attack. And as a result, also, it means you're paying on-chain transaction fees every time you use Lightning on it. So fees are still considerably high when on-chain fees are high. So people are seeing high fees. They're seeing failed payments. They're seeing all this stuff. So if you are using Muun wallet with 2 U's, don't panic. You will be able to send your on-chain transaction out of Muun. Okay. Now, if there's a sustained high fee market, you might get absolutely screwed there in terms of having to pay that on-chain fee to get it confirmed. But we're starting to see fees come down. You want to basically send an on-chain transaction to remove yourself from Muun. I do not think that anyone should underestimate how far degens will go to degen. And I still do not think Mempools will clear again. But even if they do clear,
They're going to
I will double down on my bets and will say, Marty, we already have a bet. I will say that transaction volume will increase again, fee pressure will increase again. So just, you got to be very, like, Muun has always been a race to release their Muun 2.0, basically. That isn't this setup before we had sustained high fees. It doesn't look like they're going to get there in time. I love Dario and team, but as an individual user, it is up to you to send your on-chain transaction out of Muun Wallet at a fee rate that you think is desirable, that gets confirmed at some point. I can't tell you the exact fee rate. It depends on how big your balance is in there and whether you're willing to eat that fee. But you want to send that on-chain transaction out. But I will say, at any moment, even if Muun goes out of business, they have a tool that you can just sweep the on-chain funds. So no matter what, you can sweep those on-chain funds. If you want to use Lightning on mobile, Phoenix Wallet is great. Send a large Bitcoin transaction in there. They'll automatically open a channel for you, an on-chain transaction. I have a guide for that at werunbtc.com/Phoenix. But just, it's something to keep in mind with Muun Wallet, because I've obviously recommended it to a lot of people. You're just take a deep breath. It's not like Binance. It's not like FTX. It's not like BlockFi. They can't rug your funds. Like, if you do nothing, they can't take your money. The only concern is that if fees go up substantially, you're going to have to pay a high Bitcoin transaction fee to send it out. But it's just a self-custody concern there. They can't actually steal your money. The worst thing you can do is panic and then pay a super high fee rate because you're afraid they're going to rug pull you.
Be aware, freaks. Be aware. Also, Blue Wallet, I think we mentioned it a couple weeks ago, they extended their window to withdraw from their custodial Lightning wallet. So if you haven't done that yet, get on it.
Also, it looks like Tippin.me is exit scamming.
What?
Yeah.
What's going on there?
So I mean, you can't send out.
I mean, their node has gone down in the past. It could just be like a bug.
Yeah, but nobody's apparently replying to support requests. There's kind of a bit of a void in terms of...
I've spoke to the guy before about his node.
Recently?
You should reach out, ask him if he's
Must have been like a year ago. I don't know.
We'll send him a message.
The node was broken, and I messaged him, and he fixed it. And
just be like, "Are you exit scamming, bro?" ?
Well, I mean, it's news now, so if he would have seen it, then I'm sure he's going to have a reason.
Yeah, like a bunch of people were reporting on it. It was all over Stacker News.
Tippin.me's Lightning node has been down for an extended period, and their support channels, including Telegram, Twitter, and email, have gone silent. Many users, myself included, have found themselves unable to access their funds. That sucks.
Yeah, see, it's important for people to realize, Muun Wallet had a pragmatic model that tried to value users first, UX-wise, in a low-fee environment, but they can't rug pull people. But these custodial Lightning wallets, they can rug pull you at will. And they can also soft rug pull you, which we saw in multiple situations where custodial wallets started to try and unwind, where they don't have liquidity to send transactions out, right? But because Muun is set up in a way that is on-chain first, you can always send that on-chain transaction. The question is just what fee you're paying.
Yeah.
There's as much... Once again, run 5 Lightning nodes. Love Lightning. Thank you for supporting the show via Lightning. On-chain is beautiful. It's just so fucking beautiful. Sorry. It's so beautiful.
Send me a Lightning invoice for 100 sats. I'll try and send it from the Tippin.me. I want to see what the problem is.
You want me to send it to you right now?
Yeah. Or if some freak wants to put an invoice, I'll try.
Marty,
you have to have good...
Send Wiz an invoice for 100 sats.
Okay, give me a second. Opens up Zeus.
While they're doing that, I thought I'd just quickly thank everyone at Bitcoin Park for making me feel so welcome here. And I'd say to any freaks listening, just get yourself down here, because it's an amazing place, and you never know, you might be invited to sit along on RXR.
It's a pleasure having you here, sir. Come back anytime. Consider it home away from home. I mean, while we're waiting, I'll also say that On the list, we have two big newses on no KYC Bitcoin buying, which I thought were cool to highlight. First of all, Bull Bitcoin has a new setup in place
Slack,
with
for Wiz.
The Canadian.
You said it's Matt.
It's in our Slack channel.
What you said
because of Parker. It's because of what I said with Parker. Now he's using me as a middleman. Bull Bitcoin announced a partnership with the Canadian Post Office, so you can bring cash to a Canadian Post Office up to $1,000 and buy Bitcoin without KYC. And Azteco has launched a bunch of partners, a large amount of partners in Brazil for their no KYC buys. So it's really cool to see both of these situations as a centralized company essentially pushing the limit on regulators, which is, we love to see it. Obviously, this is a completely different tactic than trying to build P2P marketplaces that are resistant to censorship. But it goes to that idea of like pragmatic, centralized
Marty,
solutions while we have it.
Hey, Marty, you sent me a screenshot. Oh, there we go.
I sent both the QR code.
It's very hard to copy and paste from the screenshot.
Marty's our resident boomer here.
I am
on the show. I'm surprised he didn't take out like a point and shoot camera and take a picture of his phone to send it to you.
Okay, 100 sats from tippin.me. Sent successfully.
It worked?
I don't know, Marty. You tell me. Did you get it?
Yep. See it on screen.
He got it to his node.
Well, I successfully debunked your myth on air.
Okay, well, freaks, run the bank. If you have any funds in tippin.me, withdraw it ASAP. Don't get rugged.
Shout out to Evan and Zeus. I love this product.
I think you should apologize to the founder of tippin.me.
I want to
Yes,
personally
you should
apologize. Do you know who the founder is?
I spoke to him once, like 2-3 years ago, but I see his node was probably just down because of the high fee environment.
No, this was before it, I think, right?
I mean, or that it was just, there was a problem.
Okay, well, I want to personally apologize to the person, but also, if you're a user, just withdraw ASAP.
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't keep funds on there anyway, but
yeah.
Beware, freaks.
It's good that I
probably not
apologize. Do you think he was listening? It just turned it on. Just
for you as well. Just for you. Everyone else is still locked out, and it's just enable Wiz.
Thank you for verifying. That was it's important that we have you on the show.
I'm glad that I donated 100 sats to Marty's beer fund. That's the happiness for me.
Don't drink beer anymore. It's disgusting. I'm kidding. Thank you for that.
What do you drink now?
I drink beer, wine, water, mostly water and coffee. Are you guys drinking in there? Would you pop open?
No, I'm the only one drinking.
I've got a epic coffee setup upstairs. I think I made 5 Chemexes full of coffee today. So.
I'm drinking this Yaller Hammer Pale Ale. It's great. It's good beer. Yeah. And I got my Unchained Capital koozie limited edition old brand before the rebrand.
Can we have like a make fun of Brad Sherman part of the show?
I still think to this day, like, Brad Sherman understands Bitcoin better than most politicians.
Pull up the video.
He's just a fucking statist.
No, this video would prove otherwise.
I curse so much.
You do. It's good. This is the first step. This is the first step is recognition. Recognition. You're catching it on the go. I had this a lot with my ums and likes when I started the podcast. I had people come out and say, stop cursing, number one, but you're also saying and like a lot. And once you're aware of it, slowly but surely.
Crypto bros make money literally by making money, and they've made over $1 trillion out of thin air. They'll accuse the U.S. government of making money out of thin air. Maybe we do, but we're the U.S. government.
Maybe we do, but we're the U.S. government. This is how detached these politicians have become from their positions.
I think Brad is incredibly consistent.
Yeah,
Brad is like, I mean, like, so this clip obviously is a very provocative clip. That is literally what the U.S. government does, though, because they're the U.S. government. There was no lies said there. But there's previous clips of Brad Sherman, and he's like, we have to stop Bitcoin because it threatens the U.S. hegemony on printing money and having a reserve currency. And he's absolutely correct. Like his conclusion is like, he's a statist and he should, force people into his shitty money so that they can maintain their corrupt power and control. But like he understands Bitcoin.
Well, he doesn't like Bitcoins aren't. I don't think he understands like the technical details. He does think it's like produced.
No, he understands like the high level. You said crypto bros.
Did say crypto bros, but like that comment, like it's out of thin air. It goes back to like Fed speak. Like Federal Reserve Chairman and the board members have to speak in a very particular way. They can allude that they're doing stuff, but if they say it explicitly, it's a no-no. Like even you go back to 2020 with Kashkari, like there's unlimited cash in the banking system. He couldn't say like we're printing it out of thin air. He just had to be like there's unlimited cash. So I bet there are people.
We had like Senator. Did you see we had Senator Kennedy say that like banks are Ponzi schemes? That was this week too, right?
I don't think that was Kennedy. It was somebody else. It was
no, not RFK. It was Senator Kennedy.
I don't think his name's Kennedy for some reason.
Yeah, the last name was Kennedy. I don't know how he's related to like the other Kennedys.
Oh, it's John Kennedy.
But, like,
from Louisiana. Yeah. We'll pull up your tweet, man.
Yeah, he's like they're complicated Ponzi schemes or something. Sophisticated Ponzi schemes.
The people at CNBC like, all right, next topic.
Yeah. Are we pulling it up?
Yeah.
This was a crazy statement, but he's also right.
With technology and the way we can communicate so quickly. And banks exist on the basis of trust. They're really just, don't take this the wrong way, sophisticated Ponzi schemes. And they work when everybody trusts each other. And you get on that iPhone and start sending text messages, and you have the herd panic and stampede. Anybody can go broke.
The speed of transmission is completely different.
It's breathtaking.
Senator Kennedy, thank you for being with us. Thank you for
all right. Please shut the fuck up. Oh God, excuse me. We're gonna move on to the next one.
But like he's right too. Like they are sophisticated Ponzi schemes.
Yeah, and he confirmed, or not even confirmed, not that it needed to be confirmed, but said something that we've been saying. Like in the age of social media, these bank runs are a completely different animal.
I love he's like, don't take this the wrong way. It's like, how else are we supposed to take it?
Feels like there's a crack in the matrix. There's more and more of these types of mask off moments where people are definitely going to be like, wait, what? There's no money in the banks? You just print it out of thin air? Thank God we have Bitcoin. You guys are a little quieter over there. You tired?
Nap time.
Is it tired?
Yes.
Well, besides Craig, the other three guests didn't know they were coming on Rabbit Hole Recap. They kind of just walked into the studio, and I had mics set up.
I was going to sit on the sofa and take a nap.
You're wrangling people in?
Yeah, I like the special guests.
Yeah,
I can't. Marty, 252 episodes.
That's palindrome episode. Let's go.
My favorite episode was 74. 74 was like a really special one.
74?
I have no idea. I'm not Stefan. I have no idea what we talked about every week.
It's
So I have a question. What is your favorite Bitcoin hater and why?
Favorite Bitcoin hater.
I really like Brad Sherman. It's like very relevant.
He top the list for you?
He's up there. Peter Schiff is up there, obviously.
It's like, what is my favorite, or which one do I dislike the most? That's what I'm trying to think of right now.
Well, that's the question, right?
Yeah.
It's like
that's what makes it tricky, right?
Yeah, Schiff's not even a good one.
Well, Schiff's nice because he's doubled down for years.
So it's got to be somebody like Ben Hunt, who I've had on the show multiple times. I do respect, but like the Ben Hunt,
well,
Green,
that's not what I meant.
Santiago Capital, that type of hater who like recognizes there's something terribly wrong with the incumbent system, like wants to fight it. But Bitcoin, since it wasn't their idea, they didn't create it. They won't support it. All these people want to create their own.
Who's that really fat guy who like runs the
Augustin Karsten?
Yeah, that's
runs the Bank of
Final Boss
International Settlements.
Yeah,
he's a good one.
Right.
And Marty took the question differently than I took. Like Marty's like, who are people I like that just don't get Bitcoin?
Yeah.
These are the people I mentioned are just like people I like laughing at when they just keep shouting at the.
Sherman's up there. Elizabeth Warren's up there. Elizabeth Warren enrages me. I shouldn't let her. Shouldn't let her get to me.
Oh yeah, Buffett, Munger, those are good ones. Krugman is great. All the fax machine memes are fantastic.
Oh, Alex DeVere's another one. That is.
One of my favorites is this guy called Bruce Schneider, who's one of the cryptographic OGs. He's one of the guys who was there inventing a lot of the algorithms that we all depend on, right? It's actually, this guy is quite a legend in the space. But it's really like once this cryptocurrency thing came along and like took the word crypto away from him, he really just became super opposed to it.
He's the one who sold crypto.com to the shitcoiners.
He may have done. I'm not sure about that. But I mean, he writes this newsletter called Counterpain, which is otherwise a great newsletter.
Yeah, Shiner on security.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah. And which is otherwise a great newsletter, but he has the odd like article in it where he's like, we must find a way to ban this. We must find a way to get it taken out. And for me, he's just quite a classic.
That's a good answer.
He's like one of those guys who just took maybe you could argue the wrong decision back in the day, and now he's just going to double down all the way to the end.
Yeah, Bitcoin derangements.
Yeah,
yeah. Who's the guy that runs the cypherpunk mailing list that Satoshi announced the white paper on? Like he was around in the early days, but he actually Metzger, I believe. He's another one of those like hardcore cypherpunks that hates on Bitcoin. I can't remember it off the top of my head. But that's like that archetype is an interesting one because it's like you guys are so close. You've been working on this for so long. Like, why? What is that mental burden that is keeping you from supporting Bitcoin?
Yeah, there's like a switch in their head which is just firmly on the one side, even though all the evidence would seem to point the other way. It's almost like a moral thing or a religious decision in their mind. It's hard to understand from the outside.
Well, I think there's a lot of ego and jealousy involved, like similar to like on the financial side, like Ben Hunt and Mike Green being like, we didn't create this. Like, I have a good idea of how we should do it. Bitcoin isn't it. Similarly with the cryptographers, they're like, oh, I imagine there's a lot of, I wish I did that. And therefore, I'm not going to support it because I didn't do it.
Yeah, there's like a sunk cost fallacy going on there where they've put so much effort into this one framework of thinking, and then someone comes along and says, wait a minute, there's something underlying all of this that you need to reevaluate everything that you've done. And that's a difficult pill, I think, to swallow. So for many of them, I reckon that's kind of it. It's just the sunk cost fallacy is at play.
Yeah. That's why you got to stay humble.
It's kind of like if you tweet out that you will always use 1 sat per V-byte and that you will die on this hill. You've got like a bit of a sunk cost.
I mean, it's interesting because we talk about Nostr a lot. And like, obviously I wasn't around on the cypherpunk mailing list to like see Bitcoin announced, right? But I think there's a lot of similarities there, and you see it with overly technical people on Nostr, which is Nostr isn't perfect, but it works, and it has this organic viral momentum and this permissionless culture of building around it that is just propelling it forward. And like to this day, Nostr's very early still. But you see a ton of technical people like, oh, that makes no sense. Like, why are we reusing keys? Like, why is this way or this that way? Like, we could do it so much better. Like, we should use we should use this DID system that we already have in place, like all this other shit. It's like, it doesn't fucking matter. And the problem is as the years go by, like those types of people get more and more anchored in that position, because on Bitcoin, it actually has a financial attachment to it. Like maybe we won't see that with Nostr, because they'll just ultimately be like, well, this is the interoperable communication protocol people are using. Like, I'm going to use this interoperable communication protocol. But with Bitcoin, like they saw it at, 10,000 Bitcoin for a penny, and they decided not to do it. And then they see some idiot libertarian, who's just fucking massively wealthy, and it drives them crazy. And then they just have to hope that it fails, instead of checking their ego and just being like, I was wrong. This is good for the world.
Yeah. It's hard for those people to grok, which is a shame.
It's hilarious, though.
It is.
Is it Mike Hearn who
Mike Hearn.
Bitcoin's a failed experiment?
Yeah, that was a good one.
He's probably
the
my
rage
favorite.
quit. The rage quit.
It was that was the best rage quit of all time. Period.
Oh, yes.
But he doesn't continue.
No.
Like, we
He
never
makes it
hear
even
from
better.
him anymore.
He's just like fully out.
He wanted to
Yeah.
get like a block list,
Strange.
didn't he? Isn't that why he
So,
quit?
so I'm obviously a Java dev, and Mike Hearn, for whatever reason, is still involved in the Java development community. And I got an email from, on a list the other day from Mike Hearn. I was like, there he is. He's still alive.
He corresponded. He rage quit Bitcoin, and then had that blog post that was a failed experiment. That joined R3, and at the same time, he had a New York Times article that all corresponded with it. Bitcoin was at like $350, $400. He was one of like the leading Bitcoin core devs at the time. Wow. Best rage quit of all time.
That was the best.
Will never be equaled in my view. Yeah.
Before we wrap up here, Matt, there is something important we have to talk about, particularly for American listeners, which is this federal E-Verify. Go to the second tweet, Logan. There's actually more data or more context.
What is this?
You haven't heard this yet? There's a bill going through.
No, I mean, I just found out how the UAE works.
There's a bill going through DC right now that, if passed, would essentially force the employers to have their employees verify that they're U.S. citizens with biometric data. So the political establishment wants to pass a window dressing solution for illegal immigration to appease a political base that is justifiably concerned about growing problems at the border. Giving Joe Biden the authority to deny a job to any American, however, is not a solution. It is a problem. They carved out agricultural workers for E-Verify because Congress thinks that migrant laborers are willing to work the jobs that Americans can be paid by the government to sit at home and not do. For a frame of reference, only 56% of able-bodied Kentuckians are in the workforce. Excessive welfare is what's actually taking jobs. The end result, every American who wants to apply for a job or keep a job will have to endure yet another layer of administrative state bureaucracy, which could be used to surveil and control us. It's a bad idea. So essentially, if you want to get a job in the U.S., you'll have to put some biometric data.
Fingerprints?
Yeah, fingerprints and stuff like
that. Is it fingerprints? Is it eye scans? Is it face scans? Like, what are the biometrics? I mean, it's all fucked up, but
they already. I saw a Trojan horse from the Libertarian Party. Biometric database, social credit system, CBDCs, big government.
But yeah, that's messed up. So KYC to have a job.
Yes.
You already have to do KYC to get better reach on Twitter, but now you're going to have to do KYC to get a job.
Yeah.
That's another myth. I've never done KYC for Twitter. But
for the blue checks?
Yeah, I've never done it.
How'd you get your blue check?
Well, the first time, I think it was Dorsey just gave it to me, or something happened.
Okay, well, you're out. But to get a blue check.
Oh, no, now I remember. They went to
historically,
Wiz.biz, and then they clicked on the Twitter link on Wiz.biz, and that's how they verified that it was.
Okay, but you did it as like a corporation. Like most people.
A brand.
The influencers, like the way they got a blue check before you paid for it was you would have to like send in your driver's license photos, stuff like that.
And then even now we even have like the gold check or whatever on the mempool, but they don't.
You
there's
show
no
like a
verification.
corporation docs or something.
No, there's no KYC. They literally go to mempool space. They click on the Twitter link. It goes to the mempool Twitter. Okay, it's legit.
Okay, but the paid blue checks nowadays, The paid blue check.
You also don't need to.
You verify a
pay
phone
like
number.
$8.
You verify a phone number and you pay with credit card, and they have 2 pieces of KYC information.
You're saying phone number is KYC.
Yeah.
And credit card is KYC.
And they intentionally block the burner number, like the known burner numbers. Phone numbers definitely like KYC.
Soft, yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
And then
I thought you
credit
meant like
card
you have
too.
to do like some
You
kind
can't
of
pay with
passport
Bitcoin either.
selfie, whatever. Yeah.
They used to for the influencer blue checks, because I tried to report impersonators or whatever, and they were like, we can give you a blue check to block your impersonators, and you have to send us your driver's license scans and whatnot to get it. And I was like, no, I don't want a blue check. But that was different, because that was just you were verifying on Twitter to have the blue check to be verified. Now it's even like the incentives are skewed, where like you get better reach, you get bold, you get encrypted DMs. You're a whole different class of citizen on Twitter. Like there's very strong incentives to give them your intimate personal information.
I don't know. Phone number and credit card is like, I'm pretty sure the coffee shop across the street also has that. Is that KYC?
Well, that's on you.
I don't know. To me, like the passport scan or whatever that's KYC.
Okay.
If you want my burner number, that's okay.
Like I said, they block the known burner numbers. Most people will not go out and buy a prepaid card with cash. And in Europe, I don't even think you can do that.
Can't you just go to like the 7-Eleven or whatever and get a SIM card that has a phone number?
I think in a lot of countries you have to do KYC to get the phone number.
Yeah, but what about this country?
KYC, you don't by law, but most of the providers, it's very difficult. It is not easy to get a number that's not attached to your identity. In America, we basically use it as a social security number. Like most people, 99% of people that are confirming the blue check are doing it with a phone number that they've used since their first phone. And they're using it with a credit card that's naturally tied to them. And then they're putting in their full billing address of their home address.
Okay, fair enough, yeah.
And then they're getting more reach out of it. And they're getting longer videos, and they're getting bold text, and they're getting encrypted DMs.
It's worth it.
But if you have a pseudonym and you consider it a brand.
The blue check's the mark of the beast.
No, it's not.
Isn't the gray check? That's the mark of the beast.
What is
like
the
a government account or something?
By the way, the Mempool verified account, because you have the square emoji.
We had to, because it's a square logo.
No, but they're all squares, right, for the organizations?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like the round thing made our logo look terrible, so we had to upgrade.
It looks good. It looks good with the orange check.
Should we wrap it up?
How do we get on this tangent? Employers shouldn't be taking your biometric information.
But Twitter's okay.
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if within
you get a square
years,
logo,
like, to
so
get
it's
the
worth
blue
it.
check, you need to like upload your fingerprints.
But back to E-Verify.
They'll do it.
I could see this bringing back cash, actually, in a good way. More people paying under the table in cash.
Wait, what? Paying with cash?
Like you just start paying. People are just going to pay people under the counter with cash. Not going to deal with any of this. It'll be undocumented workers.
I mean, I think they're paying that's the ridiculous part. It's just about control, because they're paying the illegals. They're not paying the illegals with anything else besides cash. Like that's what they're paying them. Like, I mean, how hard is it to, I imagine it's very difficult to be an illegal and get a bank account and like get all this shit. Because they don't have the KYC docs to do it in the first place. Because to open a bank account, they ask for your social security number and all that shit.
That's a good point.
It's all about control. The whole thing's about control.
Yeah, they want to control you. They hate you. They think you're a peasant. Yeah, going back to Brad Sherman, like, the point I wanted to make was like, these people are completely disconnected from what they're supposed to be, which is civil servants serving us. They think they rule over us. Brad Sherman made that very clear. We get to print the money out of thin air, and you have to deal with it.
It's true.
Well, maybe we should finish on some positive news.
That'd be great, Craig. Thank
All
you.
right, so I'm just going to mention 2 articles that I've seen in the last week, which I don't know, you can kind of pass over, but I think that they are quite good news. The one is that, we see the amount of crypto ownership, it says. So we don't know whether it's Bitcoin, probably Tether or something like that. But it's certainly increasing more in countries where the sort of inflation rate is much higher. And I think that that's a really positive sign, because that's the sort of game theory model that we all expect to take place, and it is taking place. And in the numbers that you see on the chart, and this is some research report from a research firm called GWI, but I mean, they are considerably higher than I would have thought. We've got Turkey at 27%. We've got Argentina at 23%. We've got the Philippines at 23%, running all the way down. I've got South Africa on the list at around 20% there. So, that's not bad. And I think it just goes to show that when your inflation rate is high, you start looking for other ways, other kind of paths.
When you have a need, you find a solution.
Correct. So, I mean, for me, that's really bullish to see. The other piece of news is that apparently we've got I'm just going to try and find it here. We've got the sort of Bitcoin held on exchanges hits a 5-year low. And for me, as the author of a self-custody wallet, that's the kind of news I want to see.
That's a big win.
I think it could have easily gone the other way. I think we could easily be in a situation where people could be buying, just saying the exchange is fine, whatever. But luckily, in a way, we've had some high-profile exchanges fail.
Massive rug pulls that
for sure
scared people into it, right?
And I think that that was definitely not a preordained outcome for me, that we would end up with new lows in terms of Bitcoin
trending down instead
of
up.
Yeah. So for me, it's really nice to see that. It makes me feel bullish, and I'm happy to read and see those kind of charts.
Yeah, and this chart from GWI, I found it, Craig, is actually pretty astonishing. So it looks like they did comparative surveys a year apart from each other in 2021 and 2022. There's a pretty big divergences. A lot of growth. Turkey went from around 18% to 27%. So it's a 50% growth in the people that are saying that they have interest in owning cryptocurrency. Poor Singapore, it went down. What happened in Singapore?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you could have sort of variance just from the research report, right? I wouldn't be, banking too much on the exactness of these figures. But taken as a whole, it's hard to argue that there's a trend here, and there's a trend that is particularly influenced by how much inflation you have in a particular country around the world. It's something that many people in the US just don't know what it's like, when your country's currency just keeps on falling against other harder currencies in the world. Certainly living in South Africa, you feel that a lot, right? Our rand is constantly weaker against the dollar, against the pound, against the euro. And I mean, you guys talk about your own currency becoming weaker and worth less. But for those living in so-called third world countries, that situation is just, you feel it so much more. And when you go and travel, as I have been, you really feel the weakness of your currency. So it just makes you think all the more, I need to put my wealth into something harder. I need to be earning in a harder currency. I need to be saving in a harder currency. And that, I think, is what we're seeing in this chart. It's just very clear, and it's good to see that people are open-minded enough to consider alternatives to the sort of fiat world, and they're doing so in large sort of numbers, it would seem.
Love to see it. That's, again, thank God we have Bitcoin, and shame on people like Brad Sherman, who, in the face of the government's ability to print money out of thin air, trying as hard as he can. I mean, that's what he was doing on Capitol Hill. He was trying to put forth a case for shutting down the industry in the United States, as banks are failing. That was like a funny tweet that Parker sent out last week when the White House Economic Advisory Board sent out a blog post about Bitcoin mining and its effect on the environment, and their intent to put a 30% excise tax on mining activities as a bank was literally failing. Like 2 hours later, First Republic went down after the block piss. It's like, you guys have better things to worry about. Stop picking on Bitcoin. And on that tip, it does look like PacWest is nearing the end of its life. It was limit down.
There'll be many
today.
more.
Yeah.
I mean, the even crazier dichotomy was them denying Caitlin Long's fully reserved bank as everything happened.
I mean, that makes sense, though. They can't allow it to exist.
Same with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That's why Brad is incredibly consistent. At least he hates us for the right reasons.
Yeah, it's true. What does he have to gain?
He's a corrupt politician. He has everything to gain. His whole career is based on it.
It's true.
He's the congressman for one of the wealthiest districts in the country.
Santa Monica, right?
I think it's one of the rich California enclaves.
It's like Orange
I don't know
County
if it's Santa Monica specifically. I think it's like where the even richer people live.
Do we have any final thoughts, gentlemen? I have to do something at 3:30. So I got 6 minutes.
Yeah, I gotta get out of here too. Let's wrap with final thoughts. Final thoughts.
If you use mempool.space, you should run your own instance of mempool space on your own hardware on your own Raspberry Pi. Because if my website goes down, which so far it hasn't, thanks to our shadowy supercodes keeping it running, it's been good. But if there is a problem with mempool space, if it gets DDoSed or attacked or servers blow up, you should run your own instance of the mempool open source project on your own hardware. It's critical infrastructure. It's open source. Use it.
Thanks, Wiz. Also, by the way, I'm going to have Wiz and Steve and Simon from the Mempool Space Project on Dispatch on Saturday at 11 Eastern Time. Consider joining us. Orange Surf, final thoughts.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate again, like, you got to come down to the park. And just thanks to you guys for inviting me to sit along here for the ride. I mean, it's been an amazing experience to see Craig presenting Sparrow and to hear from Wiz and the Mempool team this week. And I think for me, the key thing on the Mempool is just while blocks have a bit of space, if that is ever to happen again in the future, make the use of it, do what you need to do, and prepare so that in the future, if fees do go up, you're ready and you're not going to get caught out.
Awesome, thanks. Craig, final thoughts.
Yeah, my thought would really just be around self-custody. I know that most of the people listening to this podcast, I would hope, have already taken that action and taken whatever funds they have off a custodial exchange. But, for those who haven't, maybe somebody, maybe your neighbor or some mate of yours is still doing so, just consider reaching out and saying, hey, be aware that, fees can go up. Be aware that exchanges do fail, consider it, think about it, and offer to help. That would be my, if you want to kind of do something, that is a really good way to do it. Most of the job that we have as Bitcoiners is getting people to self-custody their funds. And it looks like it's going well, but we can never do enough. So that would be
awesome. Well, thanks, Craig. Thanks, Orange Surf. Thanks, Wiz. I love you, Marty.
Do you have any final thoughts?
Bitcoin is working as designed. Stay humble, stack sats.
Yeah, my final thought is we need to keep ridiculing people like Brad Sherman. This is the way we defeat these despots. So just make fun of them. Just keep making fun of them. Peace and love.